Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Kaijunaut channel and to our brand new debut of the Cryptic Happenings podcast. If you had tuned in before to the earlier podcast of the day, you know that this was coming up. And today's going to be a very special one because I'm going to be joined by a special guest, Lizard King Productions, a good friend of mine who is a co-host on many other podcasts very frequent, such as the Zimcast, Master Essays. And so he'll be joining me here and sharing his stories regarding cryptid encounters. I will be inviting him shortly. So let's see. Thank you for stopping by. And then let's see here. So then give me just a second because I will have to step away, but I will be here in just a sec. But first, let me just. What's the. Should be there. Yeah. There you go. So I will be just a second, waiting for the guest, and then I just gotta take care of one thing. So I'll be right back. All right, I am back. Thank you for your patience. And then, here we are. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello there. Good to have you on.
It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, the pleasure is all mine. I've honestly been wanting to have you on in some form or another so that we can discuss this, because I remember not too long ago you had mentioned that that you've had personal encounters in the past. I believe it was one of the Zimcasts, and then you had also shared this particular story as well there. I did catch that, but I really wanted to get like a in-depth one-on-one.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, yeah, that was a little while back. That was during, as you said, one of Zim's podcasts that he had. I think it was about like character development, and someone brought up, some one of their creature designs, and it looked like a drop bear, and that has to do with cryptozoology, and that's what led to my story. So, but I have had two encounters with what I believe is Sasquatch, Bigfoot. I also go out to different parks, like they're state forests, so there's no like genuine trail. It is more or less, it's not like an upkept park, like where you would go and the trails are more upkept. They're asphalt, walkways. For those who don't know what state forests are, they're just protected areas. I mean, there are sections where hunters can go in. There are sections that, um, regular, people can go in, walk in the woods, but there's not a whole lot of like development done in those woods. Um, so they're mainly untouched. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so, and in Indiana, in the southern part of Indiana, anyway, where I'm from or where I live at, there have been many, many reports of big, hairy, upright creatures that have been in um, Yellowwood State Forest, um, Morgan Monroe. That's one of the more famously known areas. Uh, yeah, Morgan Monroe State Forest. There's a few other state forests that are more closer to the Kentucky border, and also pushing into Ohio as well. So I have been to multiple areas in the southern part of this state, and I have come across so much evidence. And I'm not the only one who goes out there. There's another guy that goes out there with me. We both investigate these creatures, and I mean we don't do it all the time. It just depends upon the time that we have. But there have been many times that we have encountered wood knocking responses to us to whoops and calls. The other guy that I know, he has had a lot more encounters than what I have. But I chose, after being in Colorado, I really took a huge interest in cryptozoology. So I went on ahead and did some online courses for cryptozoology.
Hmm.
So,
Okay.
um, I mean, I'm not a 100% expert, but I do have some schooling behind me and zoological education behind me as well, being a veterinary technician, um, being in the veterinary world, and also being a hunter myself. I spend a lot of time out in the woods anyway, so I know a lot of the animal life that should be out there, and I also know when
Mm-hmm.
something shouldn't be out there.
All right. Yeah, that is a very interesting background and sort of helps cement that you at least have some idea of what should be going on. And then, so first things first, take me back to before your earliest encounter. Like, what was your mindset of the whole, or like your thoughts on the Sasquatch phenomenon as a whole?
Well, before the encounter, I was very much into monsters to begin with. I already knew about, Bigfoot. I mean, did I really think that it was a true thing? No, again, I was a kid. I was just more enthralled with the fact that there's a giant monster that's in the woods. I loved hearing about the Loch Ness monster, Bigfoot, Chupacabra, the Jersey Devil, uh, the Lake Champlain monster. I mean, all those, prehistoric like creatures that, I mean, I was a kid. I loved dinosaurs, and hearing that there could be dinosaurs still alive in the form of these cryptids, it's like, well, who's to say? I mean, we don't know a whole lot. I mean, we know more about the stars in the sky than we do the earth we walk on. So it's like, well, why not? There could be, or something that is a living relic. And what
Mm-hmm.
really set it in cement for me was when I heard that the coelacanth still exists. And it's like, well, then there you go. That's supposed to be a fish that died 65 million years ago. And yet there it is. Here it is, actually still alive, swimming around in our oceans. So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, so what else could be living out there? Because again, that just proves that we don't know a whole lot about the earth we walk on. So, um, but when I was a kid, I really loved dinosaurs. I knew about them, but did I really give it much thought? Like, could it be real? No, but I was a kid just enthralled with stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was very much the same way. Like cryptozoology is like my next big thing next to Godzilla and dinosaurs. I grew up on, shows like Finding Bigfoot, Lost
Yep,
Tapes,
yep.
all of those things. I was very much enthralled with it myself. And so going into your story here, I guess just start from the beginning of like what was the context behind the encounter and then the encounter itself.
Yeah. So I'm going to take you back a little bit before the encounter. So I went into the United States Air Force. I went into basic training, which is down in Texas, Lackland Air Force Base in Texas. Um, we have 8 weeks of basic training. So this actually takes place during the 6th week of basic training, which is known as Beast Week. What that entails is all the skills and things that we had learned up to week 5. We were basically put in the middle of nowhere to practice, basically to put what we've learned to practice or into practice. So we were driven in bus. Well, you guys would call it a bus. It was actually a military transit. We were sent out to this area that was completely surrounded by woods. There was sand everywhere, and it was just a small little like a crude military base that you would probably find over in Iraq or Iran or in many other nations that we we occupy. So we were dropped off there, and we only had one MTI, military training instructor. And they really didn't stay with us. What they did was that they would be there during the day, but then they would leave us at night. They wouldn't be there. So we had this area that was about the size, maybe of like half a football field, maybe 3/4 the size of a football field. And it had, a main building, our sleeping tents where they were giant medical tents, basically set up. They're military grade medical tents, but we use them as a where we set up our cots to sleep. And around this whole area was a giant X fence barrier that was set up between us and basically the rest of the outside world, which was all trees. And if you're going to ask me where is this at, I don't know, but I know that it was about 30 minutes away from Lackland Air Force Base. So, but we didn't have any phones on us. We couldn't, track ourselves where we were at. So I can't really tell you where it's at because none of us really knew. So, and we're out there for a week from Monday all the way up to Saturday. Sunday was when they were going to come and get us. And, once we made it through there and we proved our worth, that was basically when we were then known as airmen. We were just known as airmen basics. So basically we were just, basic trainees. But if we made it through that week, we basically were able to move on and actually be called an airman. So during that time, I think it was Tuesday night. Actually, it was Wednesday morning because it was that Tuesday evening we went to sleep. And when we sleep at night, there's always 2 airmen that would be up. And they would be stationed outside of the sleeping quarter tent. And each tent had 2 men that would be there, 2 men or 2 women that would be outside those tents and watching for 2 hours per shift. Well, my shift was from 1 in the morning to 3 in the morning. So my time had come. Another airman was with me, and he was not part of my original flight, which is basically the group of men that I had been spending the past 5 weeks with. We were basically kind of melded in with one another, so we didn't really all like stay together that whole time. They separated us out so that basically it would get us used to, whenever we would have to go overseas, we weren't going to be with the same men or
Yeah.
women that we came into basic with. It would get us used to being with different people. So, 1 o'clock came, we were both sitting out there. We had our M16s with us, and they are real weapons. However, there's no ammunition. They don't give trainees ammunition. And they were known as test M16s, but they're still the real thing. They're gutted to the point that they cannot actually be used. Like if you put a clip in there, you're not going to be able to fire it because there's certain parts that are missing that won't allow you to actually fire a round. So we had to have those with us as well because it's part of security duty. So an hour goes by. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning. And, we're just sitting there and we're looking out, and where our tent was it was one of the ones that was more closer to the X-fence barrier. And beyond that was just trees, low-lying shrubs and bushes. And the only light that we have is the light that's above us, that basically silhouette or keeps light in front of the main entrance to our tent. And it's the same thing with the other tents that would be nearby. But that was it. So we were just talking just to keep ourselves awake because it is the middle of the night and we're dog tired. So I just started talking about things, and then I brought up, well, have you ever heard of chupacabra? And he's like, well, yeah, I've heard about it, but I don't really know. And it's like, well, I don't know, but I mean, I've heard of, chupacabra being here in Texas. And just as I said that, and I was talking about that, I looked back at him and he's paler than a ghost. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? And I turn around to look where he's looking at because he's not looking at me. He's looking at the woods. So I turned to look at the woods, and there in the darkness, all I could see was a pair of red eyes. And they were staring right back at us. And I have to guesstimate that the eyes where they were was anywhere between 7.5 to 8 feet off the ground. And these things kind of moved around a little bit. They kind of shifted side to side. And it wasn't like the movement of an owl where they bob their head and they move their head side to side because they're trying to get, because what an owl does that mainly to focus in their eyes to see, prey that they're about ready to go after. They're bobbing their head. This wasn't like the bobbing of an owl head, which is quick and rapid. It's up and down, side to side. This thing was swaying back and forth, but kind of leaning like it was wanting to get a good look. And it kind of just stood there, but swayed a little bit. It blinked its eyes a few times. It seemed like forever. But then it decided to just turn its head or turn away, and we could hear it walk away and start moving brush as it went. I mean, it was just a and it was gone. And it messed up the airman who I was with so much that he was actually medically discharged from boot camp in week 7.
Wow.
So the week following, because he was just so terrified of this. He couldn't sleep at night. He was completely traumatized. Even that whole time that we were still out there, he was completely traumatized by this thing. So, but it scared me because this thing was just it was so high up off the ground, and just remembering all of that. And so it was the next morning that, when the sun came up and our shift was over at 3 a.m, and we traded out with the next 2 airmen. We didn't say anything to them because it was one of those things where it's like, it was kind of an unspoken thing where it was like, we shouldn't say anything to anyone because no one's going to believe us. I mean, why would we say anything about this? And the thing is, a few hours after that, it was probably about 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock that morning, we heard a pack of coyotes going off. So, and I remember that too. And that was, I mean, it was like, okay, why are they going off for? So with that, we were getting ready to march out and head out that morning after chow or after breakfast. But before I fell in line, I went to the edge of the X fence, and I could see where this thing was because I was able to see one broken branch that was, as high as my head was. So I'm 6 foot tall. And this thing was freshly snapped and like it was moved out of the way. Like what I would do while I'm trying to track a deer or trying to clear a game trail for myself and for the deer to come in and use, I have to snap certain branches, but those are at about 3.5 to 4 feet in height because that's the branches are coming up into my face. So these snaps were right at where my head was, and I'm 6 foot, and I could see where it just snapped that and it kind of pushed its way through. But I didn't have much time to really stand there and really, get a good look because I had to fall back in line. So that was my very, very first encounter with what I truly believe was Sasquatch.
All right. And so, so this place again. So you said there was like a fence in between, like you guys, and then whatever this thing was in the wood line?
Yes.
All right. So you were able to see like these two glowing eyes, like just like right behind the tree line?
Yeah, just within the tree line.
And then you mentioned you heard the thing walking, and like was that what you like heard? You heard like bipedal walking?
Yeah, because again, we march everywhere we went. When we were, there, you can hear the sound of, what bipedal people sound like. It's a very distinct sound only human beings have. I mean, and like I said, being out in the woods, deer don't make a sound. You may think so because they're big. They're big animals. I mean, they're not like the size of elk or moose, but they're a decent sized animal.
Mm-hmm.
And even a buck who is, almost 200 pounds and has, 10 points on its head, that's a big buck. You don't hear them. You barely hear them. But if your ears are keen enough to listen, they make a definite sound when they walk, which is a toot 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 toot. So you're hearing all 4 feet touch the ground at some point. So when they're walking, it's just But for anything that's walking up on two legs, it's just
Yeah.
that's all you're hearing. And so the fact that this thing walked away on 2 feet, because that is what I heard, but not in the softest of sounds. Like you could hear this thing pushing branches to the side, breaking them as it went, as it walked away.
Mm. And then, did you ever hear back from the other airmen you saw him with, or
No,
no? You never heard back from him.
I did not have his contact information. So
Mm.
I've not been able to contact him. I don't know where or what happened to him. All I know was that he was medically discharged in week 7.
Okay. Wow.
And
And
that's, I mean, and from there, I mean, they don't tell you anything else. They just tell you that
mhm.
this, because I can't say a whole lot because because since I am disabled, I'm a disabled veteran, but I still have about 3 more years under the inactive service. So there are certain things I cannot talk about until that time is up. By law, by the military standards, there are things that I cannot talk about unless as in like being in the military, then we can talk back and forth about it because we know. But I can't give names. I'm not allowed to.
Mhm.
Um, but all I am allowed to say is that the airman that I was with, I asked about him because week 7 is basically, it's like the graduation period. I mean, week 8, you're going to be graduating by the end of week 8. You kind of get a little taste of freedom during week 8. Week 7 is basically you've now become an airman. Um, you kind of get not really like a uh, like freedom, but you have more control over what you're doing
Mhm.
instead of an MTI military training instructor, telling you what to do. So we were able to kind of go to different flights and kind of converse with them. We were able to go to like the BMV, or not the BMV, sorry, forgive me, the basically the military commissary, um, the the basically like the military mall, I guess you want to call it.
Mhm.
We could go there. And so I asked about him, and they said, "Haven't you heard? He's been discharged." I was like, "What? He was discharged? Why?" And they said that he would wake up at night shrieking, like screaming, and he was just so upset. And they were trying to figure out what was wrong with him. He really didn't want to talk about it, but every night he would wake up screaming, and it was just not very conducive. And so they sent him to the basically the medical flight, which is where, if you end up getting sick during basic training, you're sent there for, if you're really sick, you're sent there. You're sent there to heal up as much as you can, but sadly, you are also held back at that time. You're not really
Mm.
going through basic training. You're in medical flight to recover from whatever whatever illness is ailing you at that time. And so he was sent there, and from what I understood, he had some mental tests done, and they found that he was not going to be able to continue. So they discharged him during basic training. from there, I don't know what happened to him. I don't know where he went. I don't know what state he's from. So I've never heard from him since.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, like that's real unfortunate, because like clearly this had a big effect on him.
From what I understood, it did. I mean, it had a very profound effect on me, but the thing is, it's not like I knew about Bigfoot and stuff. Like I told you, when I was younger, I was really into that kind of stuff. So it didn't. I guess it's not the word I'm looking for. I can't find right now, but the word is not. I wasn't shocked by it. I mean, I very much was, but it didn't. I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. I kind of knew of their existence, but I didn't think that I would be seeing one. I didn't think that,
Yeah.
I would be encountering something like that because, again, being in the military, it's a controlled environment. And, and I've told my story to a few people, and I try not to tell it too much because sometimes, I have been made fun of for it. I've also had people say that, well, it could have been, a military training instructor messing with you guys because, they are known to do that. Yes, they are known to do that during the actual training process. During Beast Week, they do not, because I got to be an MTI, not exactly like, having my own new, basic trainees coming in, but I got to be very much a part of the basic trainee experience. So I was an E3. That is for the Air Force. That's an airman first class. So since I was a medic, I did get a chance to be down there and be a part of, kind of be like behind the curtain, if you will, because when you're going into basic training, everything is terrifying. You're having everybody yelling and screaming at you, and you don't know which way is up. You don't know which way is down. You might be walking on your head. You have no idea. Everything is just all your emotions are on overload at that moment because they're doing it purposefully. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I'm saying that I got to have that chance to be behind the curtain where I'm not the one that's being yelled and screamed at. I'm the one doing it along, or not really yelling and screaming. That was left to the MTIs. I more or less dealt with the medical side of it, but I also got to be behind that curtain and see how things go. So, from what I do remember, they said that there are really no MTIs during week 6. There's only the one, maybe 2, but they're only there during the day. They are not there at night. They leave and go back to their home. They drive the 30 minutes, so some, time away, because their family is, in the military housing on the base. So they get to go home. They don't have to stay with the basic trainees. They just have to be there during the day. They're not there at night. They go home. So it's like, okay, well then that's my argument, is that it's like, it's not a military training instructor. It's not someone trying to mess with us, because like I said, I've had people say, well, it could have been a military training instructor, having big lights and moving around. No, they don't think about doing that kind of stuff. They're not that elaborate.
Yeah.
What they do is mess with your mind when it comes down to being in the barracks, being, marching you all day, almost all night. That's their job, is to break you down mentally so they can rebuild you back up into a fighting machine. They're not there to mess with you to the sense of doing elaborate, showing offs. Their elaborate showing offs is basically them yelling and cussing you out in your face about 2 inches away from you. That's about
Mhm.
the extent. They don't do anything like that. But that doesn't satisfy a lot of people. So
Yeah.
that doesn't
Yeah.
satisfy them, and they're, well, it could have been. And it's like, no,
Mhm.
because I got to be there. It's not.
Yeah. Like you have a good idea of what it shouldn't be.
Right.
Right. And then let's see, there's one question or something that was brought up that I wanted to pose as a question. Was there any like activity before the immediate encounter or anything you noticed or any noise or anything?
No, because again, we started our shift at 1 in the morning. This occurred probably around 2 something in the morning. And again, we were in the middle of talking with one another. So, and we're sitting in metal, fold up chairs, and we're just talking to one another. So we're not really paying attention really to the world around us. So if it did walk up, we wouldn't have known, because again, where this thing was at was anywhere from 70 to maybe 75 yards away.
Mm.
So where our tent was, there was a big enough gap between our tent and the cross fencing that separated us from the woods. And the woods were probably where the tree line started, was about another good like 10 yards from the cross fencing.
Okay. Yeah, because there's this thing brought up. If Bigfoot can make so much noise, how do we not hear them all the time? The thing is, most often we do, but they're also pretty elusive when it comes to investigating some stuff, from what I've gathered over various
Yeah.
reports, and definitely this one. Like, you
So
didn't know it was there until you saw it.
right. And the thing is, it's just like with gorillas or the other great apes. They can be absolutely quiet, and you can walk past them and you have no idea they're there until they show themselves. And that's not just me saying that. That's been researchers going out into the field and, trying to find silverback gorillas and, just study them. And there's been many, many, you know, field researchers saying that they had no idea the gorillas were there until all of a sudden they showed up. And
Mm,
gorillas, as we all know, are like 300 to 400 pounds. Even the big silverback males are massive, but they can be absolutely quiet when they want to be. And so with Bigfoot or the Sasquatch, I believe that they are very much the same. If they want to be quiet, they'll do it. And they and I know they can, because again, I mean, we'll talk about it later on, because I've gone on many expeditions myself, and I have found a whole lot of stuff that, you know, it's mind blowing. But, as big as they are, I mean, it's just like with elk, and it's just like with moose. If moose don't want to be heard or seen, they can do it. Black
yeah.
bear, I mean, I've interacted with black bear, I've interacted with elk, I've interacted with mountain lions when I was stationed out in Colorado, which I have a few stories there about me finding a footprint up on Pikes Peak when we had to run that for PT, physical training. Um, but I mean, our base was literally set in a wildlife like preserve, so we couldn't do too much to it. We couldn't touch it. Basically, our base, which was the Air Force Academy, um, was literally in woods. We were encompassed by it. We were surrounded by it. There was trees everywhere. I mean, we were literally on the side of a mountain. So,
Mm.
so it's like I've been around giant animals, and you have no idea they're there until they either move and let you know they're there, or they run away from you.
Yeah.
So again, even when I'm hunting, I don't even know the deer are there until I look down, and there they are. They're either right under my tree stand, and I had no idea that they
Mhm.
were coming until I looked down. And again, deer are big animals too. They're the biggest animal we have here in the state of Indiana. So
Mm.
so it's like for a Sasquatch to be able to move around without being heard is possible. I do believe they can do it without being heard. But
Yeah.
they do communicate just like the great apes do with, when, and we have video of this, of gorillas taking branches and slapping it against trees, orangutans doing it, chimpanzees doing it, um, grabbing stones and throwing them using weapons, tools like rocks and things, and using them as a tool, as like a weapon to throw at rival uh, groups of apes. That, like with the chimpanzees, they have rival gangs that when two groups come together, they go to war. Well, what do they use? They don't
Hmm.
just use their hands. They use what's around them. They'll grab branches, they'll grab rocks, and they'll start throwing things. Well,
Yeah.
that's a lot of encounters with Bigfoot. They have rocks thrown at them, but these aren't like little stones like that you can find on a regular path. These are rocks about the size of your head that are being launched, and branches being thrown and clacked up against trees. So if they want to make noise, they'll do it. And I've heard those before, and it
Hmm.
makes, I mean, even thinking about it now is making my hair stand up on end.
Yeah.
So to answer that question, it's like they're there, but if they don't want to be seen, just like with a lot of animals, they can go quiet and they disappear. And it's
Yeah.
not the, oh well, they turn invisible. No, they use the wood to their advantage, and they hide and they become absolutely quiet, and they can do it. Any animal can do it.
Hmm. Yeah. And then let's see. One other thing I wanted to bring up is I remember taking note of it when you first mentioned it. The thing about the eye glow and
Mm-hmm.
the what was it called? The
Oh, it's the reflective lens in the eye. It's the
something
oh
lucidum.
yeah, the paralucidum.
Yeah.
The paralucidum, which is, it's in deer. Deer have it. Um, uh, Almost every animal has it. Dogs have it. Wolves have it. Bears do. Alligators, frogs. It's just the reflective part of the eye that's behind the iris that reflects light. So it captures it, but it also reflects it. And you
Hmm.
see that more in animals who are, nocturnal, or who can be both nocturnal and, forgive me, I forget the name of the day walkers.
Diurnal or something. I think
Yeah,
it's
it's
just
like,
diurnal.
oh, it's diurnal. Yeah,
Diurnal.
there's,
Yeah.
yeah, diurnal and nocturnal. Um, you know, so that has a big part to play. Um, but for deer, wolves, bears, um, their paralucidum will glow either like a yellowish color to a yellowish green, sometimes a green color, but that's just the reflective light that you're seeing from their paralucidum. Um,
Hmm.
that it's just capturing the light and reflecting it back. However,
Yeah.
the only two animals that are two types of animals, I should say, that have a red paralucidum are crocodilians. They are really well known for having a red eye shine. paralucidum
That's right.
reflection. Some frogs do, not many, but some. And then owls can have the same. Um, those are the only ones that have like some owls have like a yellowish red to like a greenish red eye shine, but the crocodilians, alligators, crocodiles, they have red reflective eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then another interesting thing is that, most primates don't have this other than a few select species of lemurs and lorises.
Yep.
So Bigfoot would probably be another one of those things where, since it is mostly a nocturnal animal, it would be likely that it would have this eye shine since we see it in other nocturnal primates.
Yep. And the thing is, who's to know? I mean, and a lot of my research of Sasquatch, Bigfoot, the hairy man, skookum, there's so many names for this creature. I do believe that they are either one of two things: either a living species or a species related to the Gigantopithecus, which we don't know exactly. We don't know a whole lot about them. All we know is what we have of their teeth and some skull
Mm-hmm.
fragments. We don't have a full skeleton. We don't have a full intact skeleton like what we do with, some of the dinosaur fossils, or the like the animals from the Pliocene, things like that, where we kind of get like maybe 90%, maybe 85% of the skeletal remains, the fossils that we
Mm-hmm.
find. We don't. Let's see, what was it? Sue, that was the most completed fossil of a Tyrannosaurus, and she was only about like, what was she, like 90 something percent, like
Yeah, I think she
90%,
is
90 something.
one of the most complete.
Yeah, one of the most complete, but that's rare.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the fossil record, there's a lot of skeletal fossil remains that we're only getting maybe 50% or less of those remains. And it's very odd that the Gigantopithecus is one of those that all we have is just some skull fragments and teeth.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. We don't. I mean, maybe a rib bone, maybe. If I remember one article saying that they found like maybe 2 or 3 rib bones, but that's it. Maybe a knuckle bone, but it's not an entire skeleton. So it's like we don't know exactly what
Yeah.
Gigantopithecus really looked like, because all we have are just teeth, and they look identical to like the great apes, like the gorillas and the orangutans, which from what they said, that they look more closely to the orangutan.
Yeah.
So so it's like, so they're very much guessing, just using the orangutan as, okay, well, this is the basis. So, and from what we can see and gather from the tooth fragments, that it looks very close to an orangutan, but just magnified.
Mm-hmm. And then it
So,
goes to show that an ape of this size did exist. And so there is precedent for something like that to possibly still be around.
yes. And the biggest argument that a lot of people have is that, okay, well, if there is a breeding population, why don't we see them? I go back to, well, have you seen a gorilla outside of a zoo? Have you seen a brown bear outside of the zoo? Have you seen any of these giant animals like elk or deer or moose outside of an enclosure where you can pay money to go in and see it? if you can tell me that you have come up to a moose, which I only got to see one time, and it scared the absolute crap out of me
Oh
because of
man.
the stories that I know about these animals. They may be herbivores, but they're not gentle giants. They are
Mhm.
not. They will soonest
Yeah.
kill you if they really want to.
Hmm.
So it's like these animals can disappear in the woods and never be seen. They can live their lives without human interaction, live, have offspring, live their life, and die, and no one even knows that they've been birthed, they've been living their life, they've had several offspring, and then died of old age. I mean, no one sees it. So for someone to say, well, you know, why don't we see them? It's because they don't want you to see them. I mean,
Mm.
yes, we know these animals are here because we've found bodies, we've documented them, we've taken video of them, but it's also like people think that, oh well, there's plenty of videos out there. People are capturing these things on video all the time. Not really. These people are actively going out there to look for them, and sometimes they find them, sometimes they don't. What you're seeing is probably months of tracking, months of looking for something, and finally getting the footage that they have. It's not oh, okay, well, they just stepped out in the woods and, oh, there it was, and they got a video of a moose. No, they got to go weeks to almost a month to try to find one. Now, yes, there is video of moose like in Maine, who, they come into neighborhoods. I mean, it's just like with deer and also with elk. When I was stationed out in Colorado, they do show up because we're in their territory, so they just show up. But they're not hanging around either. They show up, then they disappear again.
Hmm.
So it's like, for those that want to say, well, how can you explain these things when we don't have any proof? I say we do. It's just being hushed up because again, me I was in the government. Again, I can't say anything, but what I can say is this: there's secrets and things that the military and the government do keep quiet. And I'm not trying to say, conspiracy theory. What I'm saying is there are things that they do keep from the public. There are things that the public does not know about, and they keep it from the public for a reason. And so, because again, the military is aware that these things are there. If that helps anybody, the military is aware that there are things like that in the woods, because there are field books that state, if you come across one of these things, leave it alone. Do not engage. Leave it alone. And that's as far as they go with it. You can
Mm.
find those because now they're made public, and it's like, well, why would the government, a military agency, have that in a manual for their soldiers when they are out doing training maneuvers out in the woods in certain areas of the United States? Why is it there? It's because they are very much aware that they are there.
Mm.
Food for thought.
Yeah, most definitely. And then just to go back to the whole, why aren't we seeing them? Like, something I always say is that, well, obviously we are. Like, if even just one of the stories of the thousands of stories is true, then obviously people are seeing them. And same thing with all the documentation. If like one of the dozens of videos or blurry photos, if even one of them is like an actual picture of an actual Sasquatch, then obviously we photographed them. So it's not to say that, oh, we're not seeing them. Obviously, we are.
Hmm. Yep.
So yeah, that's another piece of food for thought because
Because
you
if
obviously
these
have
things
this
really,
phenomenon going on.
right, if these things really weren't real, then what are people seeing? There's not just, maybe 10 people in the whole of the United States or of the world saying that they saw this thing. If that was the case, then yeah, I would pass it off as being, I would pass them off as, if I didn't have my encounter, I would have passed it off as, well, it's just 10 people. So it's like, okay, that's a story that they're keeping within their little group. But no, there are sightings throughout the world, not just the United States. There are so many sightings in South America, Africa, Australia, New Guinea, China, uh, Russia, in Europe, in the Middle East. There's so many, and people are like, well, wait a minute. They're all saying that they have different names. Yeah, they all have different names, but look at the description of each one. They're about the same.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and people are like, well, wait a minute. The Yeti is supposed to be white like the snow. No, the Yeti
Yeah,
is not white. That is more,
big
you know,
misconception.
yeah, it's a huge misconception. Even though it was known as the abominable snowman, they called it that because it was found up in that people were seeing these things up in the mountains in the Himalayas in the snow. Doesn't mean that they were white like the snow. The Yeti is more depicted as being dark haired to a dark brown to even sometimes being like a reddish brown sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So no, they they're not white. Now, that's not to say that there are Bigfoots or Sasquatch that are gray, because just like with us, as
Mm-hmm.
we get older, we do gray out. We get gray hair because we're getting older. Animals like dogs, you can see it in their faces when they get older. They start getting more gray hair around their face. Deer, if you really found a really old deer or an older deer, you can see more white in their fur. Now, it's not to the extent of their whole body is completely gray because of old age. Now, there's also some that are albino. There are some
Mm-hmm.
albino deer. There's a lot of cases of albinoism. There is in apes as well. Human beings, we also there's many cases of albino people. So there are the cases that there have been some reports of seeing a white Bigfoot that could be either a older Sasquatch or one that is dealing with the albinoism that is not really like a common thing, but it does happen in nature.
Mm-hmm.
So again, there could be. I'm not saying that there isn't. There
Yeah.
very much could be.
Another thing is it goes to show because let's see, we are kind of saying they're all from far off environments. How would they be the same? The thing is, if you could deep dive into these reports, you typically find that they all have varying descriptions in both appearances and as well as behaviors because they're
Yep.
not all the same. It's like humans,
Mm-hmm.
humans are so far spread out and there's variations between different, like races, ethnicities. So it would make sense that for another animal to have as much widespread um, environments that they would also have differences as well.
Yes, and that very much comes into play with any animal. Like, for instance, with dogs. We all know what a dog is, but there's different variations of a dog, but they all have the base characteristics that make them a dog. Every dog has a tail, if it's bobbed or not. Every dog has, 4 legs. They all walk on all fours. They're digitigrade. They have basic characteristics that still make them a dog, even though there are different breeds. There's different sizes of dogs. Same thing with deer. There's not just deer here in the United States. There are different deer throughout the world, but they are all still ungulates, deer. Same thing with cows. They're cows, sheep. They are also considered ungulates, I believe, yeah. But they all still have the same characteristics. Deer are hindgut digesters. Same with cows. Same with sheep. But they're still that. So their base genetic makeup is the same. There are differences among them. I mean, here's a really good prime example of this, and I'm going to use deer again because they're what I really know. There is the white-tailed deer, and then there is the mule deer. When it comes down to it, they look almost the same. You look at their build, you look at everything that is physically on them, they are the same. However, they do have differences. White-tailed deer, for the bucks, their antlers grow a certain way. They have the main beam, and then they have points jetting out of the main beam. Let's go over to a mule deer. A mule deer buck has the main beam, but that main beam then splits into 2 branches. And then the 2 branches split off into 2 other branches, and those are the points. White-tailed deer, they have small ears, but they're still pretty big. Mule deer, they have bigger ears. That's where the name mule deer comes from, because their ears are they're big like a mule's. White-tailed deer, by their namesake, they have a white tail. Mule deer have the same, but it's not really white. Their white is more around their backside. They have more white around their backside instead of on their tail. There's also the size difference. White-tailed deer are a little bit higher. Mule deer are a little bit shorter because mule deer are more designed to be in mountainous areas. They don't need to be tall and lanky. They need to be short and a little bit stocky to deal with the terrain that they're in. Mm-hmm. But they're still a deer. So let's apply this to Bigfoot. There's the North American Sasquatch, which is known to be more in like the Rocky Mountains, Canada and Alaska. The skunk ape, it's in Florida, Louisiana, in the marshier areas. It's not as big and bulky. For the Sasquatch in the Rocky Mountains and in the northwest part of the United States and into Canada, it's described as being big, hulking, like looking at the Incredible Hulk, but covered in massive amounts of fur. The skunk ape, it's not big and hulking. It still has muscle, and you can see it. You can see muscle in fur, but they're more lanky. And their fur is not as thick and as dense. And it's because of the environment they're in. So that's one prime example. The Omnisty, the man ape in Russia, it's smaller, but it's thicker. It's more robust. It's described as being so. But it's more ape-like instead of more human-like. But it's still big. It's anywhere from 6 to 7.5 feet tall. And again, people don't really know this, but it's like being 6 foot and taller for a human being, it's starting to now become more common. because there are a lot of really tall people, but the typical size of a human male is from 5'6" to 5'9", maybe pushing 5'10". That is the normal range for a human male. 5'6" being the minimum. The max usually about 5'10", maybe 5'11", and that's pushing it. But seeing men that are 6 foot, 6.5, like Shaq, he's 7 foot. Is he 7'2"?
Oh, I know he's up there.
Oh yeah, he's tall. Michael Jordan, he's like 6'8", 6'9". It's not common for people to be that tall. There's not that many tall people. Yeah, there's a lot of tall basketball players. There's some tall football players. There are some tall people here and there, but it's not common. It's more common to find men anywhere from 5'6" to about 5'10" at best. So those differences between different males, excuse me, that is just how we are bred and designed. And I'm kind of now losing where I was going with this. I apologize.
Well,
I was going somewhere with
this. Goes to show there are vast amounts of differences between different, Sasquatch, to say, of different continents. They range in size, build, behavior. It's all different, and it goes well to show that as a species, they do vary from different regions.
Yes, but they're all based on the same blueprint. Now, what that true blueprint is, don't know. But you can find the commonality between from all those stories, like the Yowie in Australia, the orang pendek, which is the little man of the forest. It's not and it's a smaller type of Bigfoot, because unlike the orangutan, which is the man of the forest, that's the translation of orangutan is man of the forest. Orang pendek is little man of the forest. They're about 3 foot to 3.5 feet. They're also known as, like the Hobbit, where the Flores man, which we have found fossil evidence, a lot of evidence of the Flores man in that area.
Yeah, and that discovery itself was only like what, a little over a decade ago?
Yeah, about 15, almost 20 years ago. And those fossils were not in the millions of years. Those were in the tens of thousands. So that should be screaming to people that when these natives, these people who live in Flores, are saying we are seeing small, upright human beings, before we even knew about the Flores man, before we even found fossil evidence of these people, of these ancient line of human beings, these people have been talking about them long before the discovery of their fossils in the caves on Flores.
I believe it was called the Ibogogo.
Yep, there's also the Ibogogo.
Yeah.
And again, and the name also differentiates between the groups of people who interact with them, because they have different names for them. Because as you said, the Ibogogo, and then there's the orang pendek, still the same thing, just a different name to those different tribes, to those different people. Because let's go back to North America, the Native Americans, they all had different names for the exact same creature they were seeing. The skookum, the hairy man, um, uh, uh,
Then
the
like the original
Sukaloo.
name, yeah, and the original like name of Sasquatch was actually Saskets.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
Sasquatch was basically the term coined from taking one of
Hmm.
the names, one of the names that the Native American tribes gave this creature. So people are like, okay, well then why don't they know it by the name Sasquatch? Because that's not what they called it. That's not what they're calling
Hmm.
it. Their tribe calls it this,
Yeah.
but it still matches the same description that the Iroquois had of this creature. And then there's the Blackfoots. They had their own name for it. Then there's the Cherokee. They had their own name for it, but it's still the same animal. Because if you ask, because they also had their own names for bears, deer, they had their own names for them, but it was all the same animal.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of things that a lot of people don't take into consideration when they start thinking about and trying to disprove that Bigfoot doesn't exist. Bigfoot, that name wasn't even coined until I think it was like 19.
I want to say like the 50s, right?
Yeah, about the 1950s, and it was only called that because the person who found the track was like, "That's a Bigfoot," and it was. It was a 16-inch footprint, and so the name, the coin name, was Bigfoot because they got really big feet.
Hmm.
And again, looking at a human being's foot, I mean, you can look at your own foot right now, and you can see how your foot, it's because we have to wear shoes. Our toes kind of angle in a weird like point because our shoes force our feet to be in that kind of position. If you go and look at like tribes in Africa and you look at their feet, they're not smushed together like ours are, where the toes are completely smushed together. They're splayed out because they don't wear shoes. And I'm not talking about like the more modern like tribes that have that have gotten like American shirts or other things like that from like a like a uh, from people who travel there to help them and
Yeah.
you know I'm talking about the
Yeah.
tribes that are deep in the woods that part or
Hmm.
in the forest that they don't get a whole lot of
Yeah.
contact from the outside world. You look at their feet, their toes are splayed out because they use their feet. There's nothing there to protect their feet. And
Hmm.
so you look at, their feet and the prints that they leave behind in like the dust, you compare that to the castings of Bigfoot tracks, the Bigfoot tracks, their toes are splayed out too. Their toes are splayed out because they're designed to be that way because they're not hindered by modern, forming with that's come from wearing shoes.
Hmm.
And that's how you can kind of tell if someone is really hoaxing you or not. Because if they just take a scan of their own foot and they just blow it up and they stamp it into the ground, you can tell that's a human foot because of how it stomped into the ground. Because it's just a human foot enlarged. It's like, nah, that's a hoax. Or
Hmm.
someone tried to cut out a cardboard, or not a cardboard, but like a board, stamp with the splayed out toes. It's like, no, again, you have to look at the morphology. If it's just flat, that's a stamp. No one's going to go into great detail unless they put a lot of time and effort and try to make the greatest hoax ever and put in the dermal ridges that are also on your foot. You may, and a lot of people don't know this. Your toes have dermal ridges, just like your
Hmm.
fingertips. your fingerprints, your toes have the exact same thing. You just don't see it because we use our feet all the time. But if you actually took a human foot, any foot, and you zoom in like on like a gorilla's foot, you can see that there are dermal ridges on their hind feet, on their hind toes. You can see it. We have it too. So it's like, who would take that much time to put dermal ridges onto a foot stamp so that they can then come back and say, hey, look what I found, and they make a cast of it, and it's so elaborate. No one takes that kind of time, and it costs money to do that. You have to have
Oh yeah.
the right equipment to do this. And so it's like, are you telling me that there's a lot of hoaxers out there who have this kind of money just set aside so that they can actually make this, so they can go out and do that and hoax people? I don't think so.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that I watched if you go into like the Survivor Man Bigfoot show, there's an episode where he tries to actually do that and like create basically a hoax footprint to test to see if the experts can determine that it is a hoax. And actually, there was a friend of mine who was on the show who's basically like this effects artist, and he made the prosthetic foot stamp thing, and he based it on an existing mold of a Bigfoot cast that exists, and it ended up costing like several $1,000s to produce. So
it's like, again, who has that kind of money to just throw out there to make this so that they can do this, so that they can have their 30 minutes of fame on TV, in front of a news camera? Who's going to spend this kind of money just to have their 30 minutes of fame? Just then to be, to come out after a little bit and say, yeah, it was a hoax, I made it. Because in the end, people are able to go back and really take a look and analyze things and really look at things. And then they find out, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this. There's something wrong with this. And then the person who hoaxed it finally comes out and says, yeah, it was a hoax. I did it. Da, 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 da. But again, but who would really want to spend thousands of dollars to make something just to have 30 minutes of fame and then it's gone? There's no revenue. You're not getting your money back. Okay, so you spent about $2,000 to $3,000 to do this just to get a happy jolly from it? Like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
So it's something that you really got to think about. It's like, who would really want to go through all that? And that's something you got to ask yourself, even for those who don't, and those who are watching this or seeing this, or will see this later on or in the future or whatever. You really got to sit there and think to yourself, I mean, would you do that just to have 15 to 30 minutes of fame and spend thousands of dollars, which in this economy, by the way, do you really want to spend that much money to make, 2 sets of footprints so that you can try to hoax this thing, when that money could go to, your food or your apartment or your house or your car payment or your electric bill, you name it. It's like, would you really want to spend that much money on doing that, and it only is going to last for about 15 to 30 minutes and then it's gone? Or put it to something else? It's like, you got to really think about that.
Yeah. All right. And then let's see. Now let's go into your let's see. So now take me back to what would you say is like the next encounter you had?
The next one, I was still in the military, but it was when I went to my first base in Colorado Springs. But this wasn't really an encounter. It was a brief moment, because again, to set this up, my commander was a huge physical training buff. He every morning we had to be out there at like 5 o'clock, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, doing, either running track or working out, doing something. We had to do something physical every morning. The only time we had a break from that was like Wednesday and Friday, Saturday, Sunday. All the other days we were up before the sun was even up, and we had to work out. Well, one of the excursions that our commander had for us was, running Pikes Peak. Now, and I'm not talking about like from the base of the mountain all the way up to the top. No, there are hiking trails and running trails that do go throughout Pikes Peak. And there is actually a couple who lives on the very top of Pikes Peak, and they come down once a month to go grocery shopping. And they even have a little store up there so that if you wanted to climb all the way up, there was a tram system that would take you like halfway, then you would stop and you could hike the rest of the way up. And if you made it up, you got to buy, like a t-shirt or something like that. That's neither here nor there. But for us, we started, we took one tram system that kind of took us from the base of the mountain to like the halfway point of where, because on mountains, the tree line stops right at 10,000 feet. 10,000 to 11,000 feet. The tree line just stops. And the rest of it from there on is basically just rock and snow if you go up even higher. Pikes Peak is about 14,000 some odd something feet. So there's a tram system that can take you from the base to the middle part of the trees, where you're like at the halfway point from to the end of the tree line of 10,000 feet. That's what we took, so that we could be from the middle, and we were supposed to jog or run up this mountain. And again, we're already at where Colorado Springs is at. You're already at about 7,000 to 8,000 feet above sea level. So from there, no, let me take that back. In Colorado, I think you're about like 4,000 to 5,000 feet above sea level. So from there, we're already up pretty high. It's kind of hard to breathe anyway. I mean, it's not like hard to breathe like, like you're on the moon kind of thing. It's the air is thinner the higher up you go.
Yeah.
So for those who were able to acclimate really well, they can jog it and they'll be fine. There are those who are not fully acclimated. It can actually hurt your body if you strain your body too much. And so that's another story for another time. Because again, I was a medic in the Air Force. We knew about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But, so we took that tram system, we got up there, and that's where we started. We started jogging. As we're going, we probably got maybe about like 30 minutes to about an hour in. We were getting ready to make a turn so that we can keep going up, but people were kind of stopping for a half second and staring at something on the ground, but they kept going. Like they would stop and stare for about a few seconds and then keep going, because we couldn't just stop, because our commander was leading the charge and was making sure everybody was following. So you couldn't just stop.
Mm-hmm.
But you could hesitate for a second while you're still jogging, slow down for a minute, look at something, and keep going. Well, everybody was stopping and looking at something. And so as I was coming up to it, that's when I was really seeing that people were kind of huddling up there for a moment, and then they just kept going. I finally got to it. It was a footprint. But again, you only have a few seconds, and then you have to keep going. Now, people were like, oh my gosh, that's a really big bear. I mean, that's a big bear. And then they kept walking. I looked at it for a half second. It's like, that looks like a human foot. And I kept running. Why that's interesting is because there's only one type of bear in Colorado, and it's the black bear. The biggest black bear on record for Colorado, the state, is it was a big male, and he was about, I think, like 800 something pounds, 700 something pounds. I mean, he was a big black bear, and they have him stuffed and mounted in I think it was like old Colorado Springs, if I remember correctly. He's there somewhere. He's somewhere around in there. Because I got to see it. He's big. But if you look at a footprint or the pad print of a black bear, it's about the size of a person's foot, maybe a few inches, longer. So probably, like a size 13 at best. But that's the back part or the back foot of a black bear. And if you look at it, it kind of looks like a human foot because of how the pad is developed. It's not like a dog's padded foot where, there's a little bit of a pad and then you see the 4 toes. It kind of has, a black bear kind of has a curve a little bit to it, has a bigger part of the pad. There's a little bit of a curve to the back part of this nodular pad. And then you see 5 toes, but they're in a kind of like a like almost how like a pyramid is kind of set up. That's kind of how their foot is set up. And then you see claws. This print was bigger than the biggest black bear print there is in Colorado. Now, some people could say, well, that's a brown bear or a grizzly bear. Yeah, there have been times that brown bear or grizzly bear, it would be more a grizzly bear really, have been reported in Colorado. But that's in the far northern part of Colorado, not around Colorado Springs. That would be further north, like even past Denver, going into the Rocky Mountains. But that's, again, a rare coincidence. And there were no reports because our base, again, was also a wildlife preserve as well. We get reports of black bear, mountain lions, elk. We get them on our channel. We're told about, hey, be aware, there's a mother black bear with her cubs. In this area, you need to be either making noise, be aware, go around, whatever, so that the troops that are there don't get harmed by these bears. Same thing with mountain lions, same thing with elk, because elk are really big animals. They can hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
So you're made aware of these animals in the area. Not once has anyone said anything about, oh, well, we had reports of a grizzly bear or a brown bear in the area. Grizzly bears and brown bears are unheard of in Colorado Springs. They're just simply not there. So if it's not a black bear and it's not a grizzly bear, then whose footprint is this? And I would have to say the print itself had to have been, if I had to put that foot into a shoe, that shoe would have to be a size 17 triple E foot.
Mm.
And think about that for a second. I'm a 10 and a half. My shoe size is 10 and a half, and I think I'm like a 1E or something like that, because I got a pretty wide foot. So I have to have my shoe to be a little bit wider so that my foot can fit comfortably into a shoe. Shaq's shoe size he's like a size 15. It's like a 14 or a 15 shoe size. I think like double E or something like that. This thing was 17 triple E. That's huge. And that was just looking at it for maybe 5 seconds at best, maybe 10. And there was a hint of maybe a claw or two, but again, I didn't get much time to stand there and study it. But I knew what I was looking at was not a bear print. And then when I had my off time, when I was in my dorm, I was able to look up, and sure enough, Pikes Peak is known for sightings of Bigfoot. And I was like, really? Here in Colorado? And that's when it really sparked my interest. And I really started digging in, and come to find out, you can talk to a whole lot of people there in Colorado Springs, in old Colorado Springs, and in the areas that are really inside the Rocky Mountains. They'll tell you stories of either people they knew that had encounters, or they themselves had encounters. And that's when I really started digging into the fact that it's like, okay, there's a reason why I'm seeing these things. It wasn't just a coincidence that I saw what I saw in Texas. And it's like, really? These things are here too? In Colorado, where I was stationed, it's like, they're here too. And it's like, well, where else could they be? And that's when I really started digging into it. And when I came back from the military, because I was honorably medically discharged because of my knee, I came back to Indiana, and it's like, well, there's no Bigfoot here. I mean, in Ohio, there's the grass man, but that's more pushing into the Appalachians and that area. Indiana's flat. It's like there's not, I mean, there are some hills here, but they're in the more southern part of Indiana, and those are the roots of the Appalachians. Those are the roots. The hills that you see in the far southern part of Indiana, those are the roots of those mountains. So I was like, well, there's no Bigfoot here. Sure enough, in the southern part of the state, and a lot of the southern part of the state, there are reports of Bigfoot. And that's when I met up with a guy who I met up with at a place that I used to work at. Him and I still meet up, and we still go and investigate. We still go and research. And he's seen more here in Indiana than I have. He's told me so many stories, and I had an interaction with him when I was out. And, and that's basically like that's the third the second true interaction was when I was out with him. But everything else has been seeing evidence of these things. I've only had 2 encounters with these things. Everything else has been either footprints that I have seen and taken pictures of, to tree structures, to rock towers, things like that. I've been seeing a lot of that. I've seen animals turned inside out.
Ooh.
In the middle of the woods, where there is no trail, there is no, human foot trails, no, someone has gone in there with a machete, nothing like that. There was literally a raccoon turned inside out. And there was no sign of human beings being anywhere near there. And this raccoon, it was the hide was split, but not by a blade.
So this wasn't like a typical, dressing of a kill that like a hunter would do.
No, because again, me being a hunter, I've had to field dress my deer, and when you see like, and I've come across coyote kills a lot. Um, you can see where the hide is kind of chewed into, torn apart, and kind of peeled back a little bit, and you can see the meat and the bones just crunched on by the coyotes. For me, when I gut a deer, it's a clean slice through because I have a surgical blade that can slice through hide and hair and split that so I can get to the rest of the meat and dress it. This thing, the skin was like peeled, like it was cut, but not with a knife. Like something kind of like tore into it and just grabbed the skin and just peeled it like what you would do with a rabbit, how or a squirrel. You just cut at certain parts and you peel that thing back.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to cut it though. You have to cut it with a knife. You can't just do it. You have to have something to cut it with, and that's for us it's a knife. This thing was torn apart and peeled like an apple.
Wow.
And it was put in a pile, like a neat pile, just slumped there. And and this was when me and the buddy of mine that I told you about, we were out investigating, and we were in a part of the woods in Fort Bend, which is not far from us, but it's a park, it's a wooded park, but this was a part of the woods that nobody walks through. There is no trail. And a lot of people who go to this park stay on the dirt trails. They stay on either the asphalt trails or the really well mapped out trails.
Mm-hmm.
And the nearest trail to us was a football field's length away.
Mm-hmm.
And we just happened upon this, and it's like, and I told him, I was like, dude, do you know what this is? He's like, I can't tell. He's like, it's this, all I can see is just flesh. I used a stick to kind of pick it up, and you could see that it was a raccoon. And it's like, this is a raccoon, dude. He's like, are you serious? I said, yeah. And the knowledge that I have of gutting an animal and being a vet tech where I'm part of surgeries, I'm now using all my knowledge, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at this thing, and it's like something ate this like a banana. Like when you peel back the skin of a banana, something ate this, but peeled back the skin like it was a banana, and you could see a lot of the bones were crunched on. Like a lot of the bones weren't even there anymore. There were some that were still left, but they were just like something crunched it. And a lot of the meat was kind of picked clean. Like,
was there any way to tell how fresh that was, or
and again, me being a woodsman myself, I've had to learn some things because I've spent nearly 10 years in the woods. 10 years and looking at, coyote kills because I need to know how many coyotes are in the area. That, again, me being a hunter. Anyway, from the look of it, it was the blood had not turned like a dried brown yet. Because again, blood will be from red when it's first killed to, in a few hours, it will start to turn like a dark brownish color because now, the blood has been, out in the air for so long, it starts to break down within just a matter of like 5 hours. Just like with your scabs where, you get cut or let's say you pick a fresh scab, there's a lot of blood, it's red. In about maybe 2 hours, you'll see that blood has solidified and become like a brownish color. But it's still kind of, mushy a little bit. You don't want to mess with it. You want it to completely dry so that it becomes a scab. It's the same thing here. This was anywhere, and I had to place my guess to 24 to 48 hours. It was still that fresh.
Wow.
It was 24 to 48 hours at best. At the very most, 36. 24, 48, 72. So about 3 days old at best, maybe 4. But no more than that. Because that was done recent. Not like terribly recent, like within the first hour or so. This was like days old. And so that was rather nerve-wracking because it's like, one, coyotes or foxes, when they kill an animal, they consume everything. The hide, the fur, they'll eat the bone, they'll eat the meat. It's all consumed. All of it is. And for a raccoon, if a coyote got a hold of a raccoon, maybe what would be left of it would be its tail. Maybe. But the rest of it would basically be gone. Because coyotes are either by themselves or their packs can be about 3 to 4, maybe 5 depending. And so if a pack of 3 coyotes were able, one coyote was able to kill a raccoon, and then the other 2 came in with it, there would be hardly anything left of it.
Yeah.
Because I've come upon coyote kills of fawns, baby deer. For those who don't know what a fawn is, it's a baby deer. All that's left is just bones, and those bones are basically chewed on. There's nothing else left. So coyotes don't turn their food inside out and then leave it. They eat everything. Same with a fox. Mm-hmm. It's like the only thing that would do that are great apes. And there's video proof of chimpanzees doing this with other chimpanzees where they've captured them, or it was a warring tribe of chimpanzees, and the victor tribe was able to kill the offspring, and they eat them.
Yeah. They do the same thing with like other monkeys too. When they capture monkeys, they'll like tear them apart.
They'll tear them apart and eat them, but they leave stuff behind. They don't eat everything. They only eat certain parts, and then they leave the rest because they don't want it. They're just like with us, there's certain parts of the cow that we want to eat. Other parts, no, we don't. Same thing with pigs and chickens. There's just parts of those animals we don't eat, like the skins. We don't eat them. Some people do, but I mean, I've never heard of a person eating the feathers as well on a chicken. With cows, some people will keep like a little bit of the skin on the cow, but then again, the skin isn't all that great. It's really tough, so they don't keep the skin. They cut the skin away along with the fur. So what would do something like that? And again, people are like, well, it could have been a hunter. All right, if that was so, why is the pelt still here? Because I know several people who are fur bear trappers. And coons sometimes get caught in their traps. Well, it's caught there. They have to dispatch it, and then they have to skin it, and they tan the fur, and they keep the fur. They make it look nice, and they can sell the pelt. And if they have enough of the pelts, they can make a pretty good profit off the pelt of a raccoon. Why leave the pelt behind? Mm-hmm. And the way that it was left behind? It's like, that's not a hunter. something
And
ate this and basically
yeah.
ate it like a banana. They peeled it and then they ate it and left what they didn't want to eat behind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely an interesting, piece of evidence. Considering like, what else could it be other than like a kill of an animal that ate it in no way that we know other animals do.
Mm-hmm. And here in the state of Indiana, the only predator we have, the biggest predator that we have, are coyotes. Now, we also now are starting to get coy wolves, and they're the in between a coyote and a wolf, but those are more up in the northern part of the state. We don't have them, in the Indianapolis area and the southern part of Indiana. They haven't made it that far south yet. But we do have coy wolves, and they're in the northern part around South Bend and around the Great Lakes. We're starting to see them, and they're a pretty decent sized canine. But the main predator here in the state is a coyote. We don't have any cougars, and if we do, it's very rare that they show up. But they're again in the more northern part of the state, and again, their rarity is so that it's almost like a cryptid in and of itself. We don't have cougars or mountain lions, as they're also known. And so if you see one, it's like, holy crap, what are you doing here? Because we don't have them. They've been eradicated years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So they're basically non-existent in the state. But they are starting to make a comeback, but they're more in the far northern part of the state, more pushing into Canada. But so it's like, okay, and again, people want to say, okay, well, it was a mountain lion, then it was a cougar. No, because mountain lions, cougars, they bring their prey up into a tree, and they still consume everything. They can eat the bone, and they also bury their stuff. By the way, if it's too big, they'll bury it and they'll come back and get it, but they'll still eat the flesh, hair and all.
Mm-hmm.
And even seeing domestic cats, we have plenty of domestic cats around where I live. I mean, they're domestic, but they're feral cats. When they eat a bird that they catch, or a squirrel that they catch, yeah, there's still parts of the animal left, but they eat what they can eat, and then when they've eaten their fill, they leave it, but they don't peel skin back. You can still tell what animal that is that they killed. You can still tell that it's a squirrel, or it's a bird, or it's a ground squirrel or a snake. You can still tell what it is. You couldn't tell what this thing was until you basically unsighted out that raccoon, because I didn't even know what it was until I took the stick and moved this flap of skin, and I could see that inside was nothing but fur. And then I could see the telltale sign of the raccoon tail that was inside of it. This thing was pulled back like a banana.
Mm.
So it's like, okay, so again, please come back at me with, well, it was some animal. Oh yeah, it was some animal, but an animal that you're refusing to say, because I know what it is.
Yeah.
Because only human beings, things with opposable thumb, can peel something like that and then leave it.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. Like animals can get pretty creative with how they dismember their prey, but something like that and the way you're describing is like not something typically you would see in any of the known animal, methods.
Mm-hmm.
At least known animals here, because as you said, like other great apes do similar things to that, but there are no great apes documented anyway in like North America.
Mm-hmm.
And then like outside of like any of that other evidence you found, like did you have any other like close encounters?
I only had one other, and this was when Me and the friend of mine, and I can say his name. Well, I don't want to say his name because he was well known in the Bigfoot community, but he's kind of pulled himself back and
Mm.
away from it, um, because he recently got married and his wife isn't, all about it. So he's been trying to pull his himself back from it. But we still go out, and do some things together. We go out to, different places, but the place that we went to was Yellowwood. Um, and him and I, and my wife and his wife were actually in the truck at that time. And we were just driving slow, just, taking a look around. And I saw something about 70 yards out. Something just really quick kind of popped its head out and brought its head back behind a tree. And I was like, stop, 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 stop. And he's like, what? And everybody's looking at me like, what? And I didn't say a word. Once he came to a stop, he didn't even have a full time to even, like the moment he put into park, I shoved that door open and I took off. And I went about maybe 10 feet into the tree line, past the tree line. And I just stopped and I kind of just stood there and I was looking directly at where I saw this thing just for a half moment pop its head out and bring its head back in. And I just stood there watching, waiting to see if anything would move. And all I saw after that was like a hand. And it wasn't really like all the way around the tree. I could see like fingertips, like black fingertips kind of touching the side of the tree, like it was like just hiding there, like just holding it, like trying to stay still, holding it. And I could see these black nubs just on the side of the tree. And I was looking around at all the other trees to see if there were any like similar nubs, like, because again, gnarled tree bark can sometimes look like fingers. It wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that these were kind of moving, not like, like moving, like it was feeling the tree, but it was just like still kind of like squeezing it a little bit. It would like flex a little bit and then unflex and flex in a little bit and unflex. And I'm just staring at this and I'm shaking. And the buddy that I'm with, he's heavy set. He doesn't move fast. So he didn't get out of the truck to come to me, because the road that we were driving on, there's a little bit of a ditch, like a divot in the ground, and then the tree line. So he wouldn't have been able to get to me very fast. But they were still in the truck and they were watching me, and I'm still looking at it and I didn't take my eyes off of it. And I put my hand out. I said, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm turning around and I'm leaving. And I turned around and I left. I got back into the truck and I was just shaking. I had no words. And so my buddy, drove on. He found a parking spot. He parked there. My wife and his wife went off and walked, and they were talking with each other. And I was like, and I said his name, and I was like, I don't know what to say. I was fumbling over my words, and he's like, just calm down. You need to breathe. And he was like, what did you see? And so I told him as best as I could what I just told you guys and told you. And he's like, well, you did the right thing by turning around and walking away. And so that was the last encounter I ever had.
Mm.
So, and since then, I've not had another one.
Wow. And that last one, Was there anything that like compelled you to like react that way, to like back away? Like why was that your immediate action?
Because it's hard to explain. And with what I have come to learn about Sasquatch and from what I have heard from other reports, from other researchers and reading their papers on this, Bigfoot has something that a lot of other animals do have. It's called infrasound. If you know what infrasound is,
Yeah, I know.
and for those who don't know, I'll explain. Infrasound is basically it's a sound that humans cannot hear, that other animals cannot hear, but it's a sound that you can feel it. You can feel it, and it's a feeling of dread. Lions have it. Lions use it. A lot of the big cats, predatory cats,
Yeah,
use
tigers use
infrasound.
it.
Yep, tigers use it. There's some other big predators that also use it as well. They use infrasound. There's also like moose. They also use infrasound, but they use it as a tactic to scare off, predators. Um, so infrasound is basically a sound that we cannot hear, but you can feel. But it gives you this feeling of unease, this feeling of dread, this feeling
Yeah,
of
there's a lot of
I'm
different side
not
effects.
safe.
Uh-huh.
And if it's strong enough, it can paralyze you for a half moment, long enough
Mm-hmm.
for a predator to come in and dispatch you because it freezes you. I had the same feeling at that
Mm-hmm.
moment. And it was just the feeling of get out. It was the feeling of leave. It was the feeling of if I don't leave, I could get hurt or something's going to hurt me. I am going to be damaged.
What
And it was
let me ask you this.
overwhelming.
Uh-huh. Let me ask you this. Like, did you at all like hear a voice in your head
No,
or anything like that?
no. All I felt, and I know why you're asking, is because there's
Mm-hmm.
been several people who have reported hearing like a
Yeah.
voice in their head, either saying leave or get out or go away, or had this feeling that there was something telling them to leave.
Mm-hmm.
No, I didn't have that. I didn't have like a voice in my head, but I
Yeah, you
had a
just had this
feeling.
feeling.
Yes, it was that overwhelming feeling of go away. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
and it was more or less like a fear for my life. Like, you know what? I need to leave. I need to walk
Yeah.
away. So I know where you, when you ask me that, it's like, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I said, there have been many reports of people, having that sensation of, like there's a voice in their head telling them you need to go away or you
Yeah,
need to
exactly.
go away. I mean, I've also heard reports and stories of, the what's known as the samurai chatter. It's like
Mm-hmm.
that kind of a sound. The buddy of mine has heard that before,
Mm.
where and he's like, the best I can describe it is like samurai chatter. Like, you're hearing, the Japanese, people in the movies, how they talk without the subtitles. It's kind of like that.
Mm.
And it's like, well, great apes do have their own form of communication as well. They have, whoops and chirps and, different guttural sounds that they make
Yeah.
that is their form of communication to one another. Well, again, falling in line with Bigfoot having or being very much ape like, it's not that far fetched
Mm-hmm.
to to say that they have something very similar too. I mean, and the
Yeah.
thing is, even gorillas have that kind of not an infrared or infrasound, but they have a presence to them that literally it's oh, what do they call that? It's not a mojo, but it's that sense of being like a badass kind of thing.
Mm,
Where they give off that feeling, that vibe, like it's the vibe or an aura that it's like I can
yeah.
mess you up. You make one wrong move, I'll mess you up.
Yeah.
So I do believe that Bigfoots do have, something very similar to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, like that's exactly why I was asking those questions because, I've heard in many reports and, whenever it's brought up like on the documentaries or on websites, like you always have reports of those same sensations. So,
Hmm.
it's very much is leaning towards, yeah, like what else could it be? And then when you saw, like you said, you saw the head poking from behind the tree, right?
Yeah, that was the first time while I was in the truck, but it was like a half second. Like, I mean, and I was just looking out into the woods. I mean, he was looking at one side because I was not the passenger seat because that's where his wife was at. I was in the back part of the truck with my wife, and she was sitting to my left. He was the driver. He was looking at one side. I was looking at the other. And, and I mean, I was just looking out into the woods, and then all of a sudden, this black thing just like a head just goes out and then back in, and it was very deep in there, like I said, about 70 yards in, and it was just there one moment and gone the next, and it's like stop, 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 stop.
And you didn't see any similar eye shine to your first encounter?
No,
Mm.
because of how quick it was. It wasn't like it wasn't like it was sitting there and waiting. It was a
Mm.
bob in and bob out.
And then,
Now
like,
with and
how?
and, and that was during the day. This wasn't at night. This was during the
Oh, so
day.
this is day. This isn't day.
Yes, it was very much during the day.
Oh wow, I must have missed that part because I thought that was night.
And
Wow.
that's the
Okay.
thing. From what I have read and heard, that Bigfoot, they are active at night, but they
Mm-hmm.
also have what's called day walkers.
Yeah.
They have, just like with a troop of chimpanzees, or like with gorillas. Um, there's the male, the dominant male. He will go around and basically do like a perimeter sweep while the rest of his clan is sleeping, or they have certain, ones that are out kind of doing like a perimeter. They're up, and moving around,
Yeah.
and basically making sure that the area is safe. I've
Mm-hmm.
heard that Bigfoot does something similar where they
Yeah.
have a day watcher or a day walker who will be out and about just making sure the area is safe. And if they feel like it's not safe, they will have their clan move. Just like again with gorillas or with chimpanzees, they will sound the alert and they will get their clan to move.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what that was, because there are a lot of um, reports of seeing Bigfoot during the day.
Yeah.
So, but are they active at night? Very much so, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not restricted to it. They
Yeah.
can still move around the daylight, but they're but they still do a lot of their moving and their activity and their hunting at night, because they're more
Mm-hmm.
nocturnal than anything else. But that doesn't mean that they're strictly to the night. Just like with owls, you can see owls who are known to be nocturnal, but
Yeah.
you can still see them flying around, in midday. Even
Mm-hmm.
bats, you can sometimes see bats flying midday, even though that they're nocturnal. So it's like they're not strictly bound by that law that, well, you're nocturnal, you can't move until nighttime. That's
Yeah.
not inherently true.
Mm-hmm. And then how tall off the ground would you reckon the head you saw was, and then as well as like the finger nubs? How tall were they off the ground behind this tree?
Again, from 70 yards, I would have to say where I saw the head, about 7.5 feet off the ground. The hands, or what I could see of the nubs, they were about like right at my shoulder height, almost head height, from what I could guess. Because again, I ran about maybe 10 yards in and stopped. So I'm about maybe 60 yards away from it. And I wear glasses, so my eyesight isn't great without them. So, and I'm a bow hunter. My eyesight really gets bad past when I'm looking through like the sight on my bow. I'm only good up to about 40 yards, but that's looking through a peep sight. But standing, with your eyes wide open, you're not like squinting and keeping one eye closed and one eye open. So standing at about 60 yards away, that's my rough guesstimate. But I knew that this thing was bigger than me anyway.
Yeah. And then, so this thing in that moment, like, was it like, did you hear any other sounds or anything else coming from it, or was it like completely silent?
It was silent from it, but I heard past it, but I didn't break like my eye contact with the tree that it was hiding behind. But I heard something just go snap. And that's the only sound that I heard. So there was a snap like further back, in the distance. But like I said, I didn't break eye contact with the tree because it's also been documented that someone can have their sighting. They turn around to try to grab something, or they look down to try to find their phone, and then they come back up and it's completely gone. The Bigfoot is gone. So it's like I didn't want to break that eye contact because like I could still see where the fingertips were at. I could still see it. So it's like I didn't want to look away to try to grab like my phone to try to take a picture because, like with deer, if you lock eyes with them, they freeze. They will not move until you move. Because I've had my encounter about 20 yards from a doe and her fawn. I was putting, I was spraying the air so that I could try to get, a scent in the air for, deer to think that there might be food. And I'm just standing there spraying. I'm about, 20 yards away from my ground blind, and I'm spraying. And then I look up, and there she was. And she was not breaking eye contact with me. I froze, and I didn't break eye contact with her. And we stood there like that for about 5 minutes. It was the longest 5 minutes of my life. But I knew that if I would have moved to either look down or to try to turn around and move away, she was going to dash off and she was going to sound the alert and let all other deer in the area know that there's danger there. So, like with any other animal, if you look down or look away, they use that opportunity to disappear, to run, to get away as fast as they can. They use that opportunity. And Bigfoot is very much the same way. So I didn't want to look away and ruin the chance of, well, I want to try to get a picture. Well, within that span of time, they're gone. So it's like, well, what am I going to take a picture of? Because now they're gone. But like I said, I had that feeling of dread, and it's like, well, I don't want to go any further, and I need to leave. It was the feeling of don't come any closer, I need to leave. And that's why I said, I'm not here to hurt you. And I put my hand up to let it, or if there was anybody else back there, because again, like I said, I heard that snap. And so it's like, okay, you're not alone. And it's like, well, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not coming any closer. I'm leaving. Goodbye.
Mm.
And that's when I turned around and I made my way back to the truck. And it wasn't like a slow walk. It was like it was a walk with purpose. Like I'm terrified,
Yeah.
but I don't want to run because I don't want to trip and fall and hurt myself because there's branches and things like that all over the ground. But it's like I moved with a purpose so I could get out of there because I felt like I was in danger.
Mm-hmm. Was there any like change in that sensation when you were walking back, or anything else you heard when you turned your back and left?
The feeling remained until I got into the truck. The moment I got back into the truck, that feeling of dread just stopped, but it left me shaking. Kind of like when, for those who, are trying to get over like a hangover, you're just shaking, you're trembling, you feel sick to your stomach. And that is an after effect of infrasound. Once infrasound stops, you get this feeling in the pit of your stomach like you're going to throw up.
Yeah.
You're shaking, you're trembling. That's how I felt. And that's why, like I said, when I was trying to talk to my buddy about it, because he told me, you need to calm down, you need to take a breath. I had to control myself because I felt nauseous.
Mm. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a side effect that I hear that happens to things, or when you get hit with the infrasound. And then, was the was there any similar sensations to your first encounter, or would you say there was anything at all similar or different?
All I can remember from the first was the feeling of fear, just like with the fellow airman that was right there with me who saw it first. It
Mm-hmm.
was just this feeling of dread, but we couldn't move. I couldn't move. I don't know what he was thinking. I wasn't really even paying attention to him because I was locked on to the red eyes that were in the wood. Um, I drew a picture of what I basically saw. It's in the field guide that I'm making right now. I don't know if I think I did put it on Instagram. So for those of you who want to see that and know that I'm on Instagram, I did post a picture of Bigfoot, and then there's the second page of like the tree structures, and then you see down at the bottom that there's like all these other Bigfoots with different eye colors, eye shines. One of them was red, and if you zoom in on that, that's literally what I saw. Were eyes that were just red. And that's the thing about Bigfoots is that they can actually change their eye shine. They can change their colors. They can go from red, green, yellow, auburn or amber to white. And I've heard many people say that could be their mood, but there is one thing that I do remember from some Native Americans who talked about it. They said you need to beware of the red-eyed ones. The ones who have red eyes are the ones that will do you harm. And it's like, okay. And so they talk about the fact that, you can see different colored eyes, but it's the red-eyed ones you need to be aware of. You need to fear them because they intend to do you harm. And so I don't know why it walked away, because at that time I didn't know a whole lot. All I knew was that there's Bigfoot. There's people that talk about Bigfoot. Yeah, there's people that talk about the Loch Ness monster and all those other cryptids. I didn't know as much as I know today at that time, so I don't know why it didn't. I mean, why it walked away. I don't know why it didn't, try to come after us, because I remember those eyes being red. And
Mm.
but again, it also comes to mind that it's like, well, Bigfoot can change their eye color, their eye shine. They can change it, it will. And and like I said, some believe that it's due to their mood, that they could be upset about something. And so I think about it as, well, maybe it was upset that we were there. It was upset that, because maybe, sometimes yeah, that area is frequented by airmen all the time, because after our 6 weeks is done, then there's another group that came in a week behind us. They're now in their 6th week. Well, we are in our 7th week. So it's constantly used. So it's like, maybe it was upset that we were there at that moment, or I mean, I don't know. But to go back to your previous question, the only feeling I remember was just fear.
Mm.
And it gripped me to the point that I didn't want to move. And when it walked away, I was still held by that fear, and I was really hoping and praying that 3 o'clock was coming, because I wanted to get back inside the tent.
Yeah.
That's all I was thinking about. I wanted 3 o'clock to get there so that I can get back into the tent and be in the safety of the tent. I mean, would it be safer? I don't know, because Bigfoot is Bigfoot. They can snap trees. Big saplings are as big as I am, as thick around as I am. Snap them pretty easy, so it can get through a tent all it wants. But I just had the feeling of, I need to get somewhere where I feel safe, because like, I don't feel safe right now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, again, there was no other sensation that I could really think of. It was just a feeling of dread.
Mm. And then for the first one, would you say that's more so due to the fact that you saw this thing, rather than like an infrasound example, or?
Again, I can't tell you, because I
Mm.
really don't know, because that's the emotion that I felt, was just fear, and I was frozen. Now, I mean, did I feel nauseous after that? I really don't remember. The only thing I can really remember when it comes down to feeling, or something that
Mm-hmm.
would be close to what infrasound, or if it even used it, um, was just the feeling of dread. Now,
Yeah.
I've heard people have, in different reports, that they have, felt that dread, they have felt that fear. They were shaking, they were trembling, um, you know, but again, like I said, knowing what I know now, I try to take what I know now, and I always go back. I always look back and try to remember, and it's like, with what I know now, does it correlate with what happened at that time? But
Mm-hmm.
again, that was about 12 to 13 years ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as Zim, and if he's listening, he'll probably find this funny, that, he calls me the old man. Well, as time goes on, it becomes harder to really remember that moment. I mean,
Yeah.
you have a lot of the, what psychologists call the, like the impressionable moments, which leave the deepest impression, which lasts like forever in your memory.
Yeah.
But a lot of the other, like, finer details fade.
Mm-hmm.
And so the eyes are a forever lasting impression. The feeling
Yeah.
of fear, of like absolute dread, is an impression that I will never forget. And
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what else to say about that. It's just those were the most impactful, and those of
Mm-hmm.
what have remained, what I can truly remember for those.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, I can still remember the night, but try to get me to, remember every single tiny, minute detail that happened that night. I still rack my brain trying to really think about.
Yeah. And I can definitely relate to a lot of what you're saying because, personally, for me, um, the cryptid adjacent encounters I've had are I once saw a full blown apparition in my neighbor's garden, and I've shared the whole story on another stream of mine. But basically, I was having like a sleepover with a friend. It was four friends we were at the sleepover. Me and another friend actually went outside, and it was like early into the night, and we were basically playing Bakugan on the sidewalk in front of his apartment complex. And then next door to that was my neighbor's garden. And something caught our attention to where we look, and we see this ghostly pale white figure, and it's all white head to toe. So it's not like this was a person that we saw in the dark. It was like you can visibly see it in the dark foliage of this guy's garden because it was his garden was like unkempt, it had cobwebs, it was like a haunted forest type of vibe. But you can see this pale white figure head to toe, and then it moves a little to the right and just disappears. And when thinking about it right now, I'm getting goosebumps, I'm getting worked up, and I just relate to that feeling that you are describing when you had your encounters. So I can definitely relate to the fear and the shock of it all because I get quivers and goosebumps every time I think about that moment.
Mhm.
But there's also things I don't remember. Like I don't remember exactly what the whole scene was, other than the image of that pale ghostly figure that was watching us.
Mm. Mm-mm-mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I Ghosts are a whole nother thing that I don't even mess with. I don't.
Hmm.
I don't. I don't, because that's something else entirely. It's
Oh
like
yeah.
I would rather deal with the physical than the, you could call it the spiritual.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
I mean,
that's a whole nother thing. It's like
yeah.
and the
And,
buddy of mine that I told you about, he's had some things like, not like that happen to him, but he's had things just flung across the room. Like he's just sitting
oh
there
yeah.
and it's just flung across the room, or something is moving across the counter. And
Yeah.
it's like, are you serious? He's like, yeah. And I said, dude, nope, you need to stop right now. Don't talk to me anymore. I'm not dealing with that. That is something I do not
Hmm.
mess with.
Yeah, it
Period.
is a spooky thing. I will say it is a spooky thing, and something like that really stays with you. It stayed
Mm-hmm.
with me all my life. And like the only other thing is like I saw a UFO, like a genuine UFO, and it was over my house, like no less. Like one night I was
Mm-hmm.
just coming back from work. I look up because I like to stargaze sometimes, and I live in like a suburb neighborhood in LA, so we get lots of smog. So I like to see him. I wonder if I can see anything tonight. I look up, and then if you see the little UFO I drew on the top there, if you like flipped it and looked at the underside, it was basically this dark shape. It was darker than the sky, which is why I really noticed it. And then there's this light in the middle, and it's moving across the sky. And then all of a sudden, it starts to disappear, And the best thing I can attribute it to is like if you watch any of the Predator movies, whenever they have the ship and then it
Yeah.
starts to cloak, it was like that. You know, like the front of this thing just starts to disappear and it's gone.
Yep.
And then like in those moments, like 100 things go through your mind because I'm trying to think: is it a helicopter? No. Is it a plane? No. And like it's like an unidentified object, you know.
Yep.
UFO.
I mean, I've had something like that happen to me once, and it was only once. And I was at my mom and dad's house. It was in the evening where like the sun just getting ready to set. Like there was just a little bit of that reddish orange light in the horizon, but you can already see stars up in the sky. And I'm hanging out at their at the back part of their fence, which overlooks the pond in their in their home division. And I just look up and I'm looking at the stars, and there's this star, but it's moving up, and it's a slow move up. It's not like, it's and I'm staring at it and I'm like, okay, is that a drone? Because, my parents told me before, while I was over there with my niece and nephews and whatnot, that, they've had a few people, have drones that they fly over the pond, and, and it's like, okay, but I've seen drones, and when they're flying at night, they have a flashing light on them. It's to basically state that, that's where the drone is at night. And, it's even like with helicopters and planes, they have the flashing light. There's there's the solid light that's on there, but then there's like the red flashing lights that are there, or the white flashing ones, because that's basically stating that it's a plane, that it's moving, it's the object that's moving. This was just a white light. It looked just like a star, but it was moving up, and it kept moving up. It didn't change its direction. It just kept going up and kept going up and wouldn't stop. And it was just going up. And I'm like, okay, that's going way too high for a drone.
Mm.
And again, it looked like a star because I was looking at stars. But this one just kept moving up and it wouldn't stop. And it was like a vertical ascent. It was a slow moving up. And it didn't veer off to the right. It didn't, veer off to the left. It didn't, zip off anywhere. It was just moving up. And it kept going up. Until I was like, you know what? Maybe it's a drone. I don't know. And then I went back and I looked up, videos of drones at night, from ground and, from the ground level looking up. Each video that I looked up, you can see the light that's on there, the permanent solitary light, but you're also seeing the flashing lights of where the blades are at, the propellers of the drone. There's flashing lights underneath it to indicate where the propellers are at. It's like there were no blinking lights to show me that there were propellers. So it's like, to this day, I still don't know what I was looking at. But it was so weird, and I kind of, and the thing is, I shrugged it off. I was like, well, I mean, maybe it could be a drone. But when I looked up videos of drones from the ground point of view, looking up at it, it's like, well, that's not what I saw though. So it's like, well, then what did I see? So it's like, I have no idea. But it's kind of left me to the point where it's like, well, maybe it was. I don't know. It was just the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. And so, like, taking all of that into account, like, obviously you have your own creative endeavors here. How have all these experiences influenced your work?
They influenced me to look into realism, to take what is real and apply that to to my artwork, because I find that sense of realism to be really cool, because there's a lot of things in nature that it's like, that's really cool. I mean, like the colors to reptiles, and how brightly colored and how the colors are arranged, to even fur patterns in animals. It's not a solid color. If you look at a lot of these at the fur of animals, yeah, from a distance it looks like it's one solid color, but when you look closer, you can see different colored hairs. You can see all that detail. And so seeing that, and the fact that it's like, okay, I want to portray that in my artwork, in what I do. And so the sense of realism I really embrace. And so when it comes down to the cryptid side of it, like what I'm doing with my cryptid guidebook, I do a ton of research into the cryptid that I'm going to draw. Kind of like with I gotta remember his name. He has an upstart YouTube channel, and he's only done 1, 2, 3, 4 videos so far of cryptids. One being the Mokele Memembe, the Kelpie. He's done the Bunyip. The Bunyip is the most recent, and he's done one other. And he talks about the cryptid and the stories, and then he goes into, what, and this is where he goes with his creative liberties to explain what these animals are. That it's like, okay, like for instance, with the Mokele Memembe, the stories are, they talk about a giant sauropod dinosaur. He's like, okay, well, he goes on and he does explain that this is his creative take. This is just him doing this. This isn't, well, this is fact. This is what I'm saying. It's like, no, he makes it plainly obvious that what he's about ready to explain and showcase is just from his imagination. The Mokele Memembe, as he sees it, is a giant tortoise, but it has those earmarks of what people are seeing in the actual legend and in the actual stories, and the accounts that are taken from people who have seen the Mokele Memembe. He takes it into account, but he tries to explain it in a more natural setting. That's like, okay, well, it's not a dinosaur, but what does look like a dinosaur? Well, if you look at a giant Galapagos tortoise, how they stretch their neck out and how they stretch themselves out, what do they look like? Well, they look like a brontosaurus. They look like a long-necked sauropod. So he goes on ahead and takes it to that further degree, but has a lot of biological, truths put into it, so that it makes it sound like it's a real animal. And that's what I'm trying to do, not to that extent, but go to the extent of, okay, instead of trying to explain it with more modern day animals, but animals that we haven't yet, discovered, why can't these be these actual animals that I'm thinking of? That it's like, well, why not take animals from the actual fossil record? Because the stories and things that are coming about different cryptids, they match certain animals from the fossil record. And that's where, again, it comes into, well, like with the coelacanth, it's people call it it's a Lazarus, what's the term that they use?
Yeah, I think Lazarus species or something.
Yeah, it's a Lazarus species where it was thought to be dead. It was thought to be extinct, but it's alive.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the coelacanth is, because it was presumed to be dead for 65 million years, and yet here it is, virtually unchanged for that long. And it's like, then, as I said previously at the beginning of this, what else could be out there? What else are we
Mm-hmm.
getting wrong? And so that's where I go with, okay, well, then let's go back to the fossil record. A lot of these stories have a lot of hallmarks to the fossil record and creatures that we know of in the fossil record. Well, what if they really are still alive, unchanged? What if we're wrong about everything we know? What if we're wrong? And so I go with the realism of what we know here and now and the animals and how they look, but I put it on to the animals that are the cryptids, the things that that science says cannot exist, but cryptozoology says they very much do. We just don't have the evidence yet. And so I feel like for me, I try to fill in the gaps. It's like there are gaps here. Well, let me fill them in, but fill them in with the sense of, well, yeah, that could possibly exist. That could possibly be it. And really all that kind of stemmed from my kaiju, and the way that I wanted to go about doing them to make them different than the standard kaiju that everybody else has, where it's again, my kaiju King Tyrannus still falls within that shadow of Godzilla, but I wanted something that would be so much different than what the standard is. And as I've explained in other videos, like with Titanic Creations, you can tell that Godzilla was a heavy influence because when you look at Titanicus, it looks like Godzilla with a giant iceberg sticking out of its head and out of its back. But if you took the silhouette and put it with the silhouette of Godzilla, you can tell that that's where the idea came from. And even Mac McClintock, who is a very good friend of mine, he even said that was the inspiration drawn from. And it's like, well, that's every original kaiju. They're you can take the silhouette of any original kaiju, take its silhouette and compare it to Godzilla, and you can clearly tell there are earmarks and hallmarks to Godzilla himself. So, and it's like I already knew that my kaiju would fall within that, and it's like, and it's true. But I wanted to go even further. It's like I wanted to actually make my stuff biologically accurate as much as science fiction would allow. Mm-hmm. Because again, and I always have to state this, is that in the end, it's still science fiction. There is no possible way that a 55-meter tall lizard, a legitimate lizard, could even exist.
Yeah.
So it's like, but still taking the laws of nature and stretching them so that it fits with what I'm trying to do. Like with King Tyrannus and his fire breath, he can't use it all the time. There are gives and takes. He can only use it so much. Once he's used it, he cannot use it anymore until it's replenished. He does not heavily rely on it like what Godzilla does with his fire breath, where Godzilla can repeatedly do it again and again and again, and it's replenished all the time. Mine, it takes attacks, and it and and again, just drawing from real world stuff, but stretching it to where it still makes it believable. To where it would then make it easy for a 55-meter tall lizard to exist, because the laws of nature being the way that they are, now I can stretch it ever so much to make it fit what I want. Because again, my kaiju doesn't spend his time on two legs. Yes, I draw him being upright, but I'm trying to do my due diligence and to really show that he doesn't spend all of his time upright. He is a lizard in the end, and lizards are very much on all fours. So, and I don't want to go any further with that. So let me turn this back to your original question, which is, how do I take my love for cryptozoology? How does that influence my art style? It's the sense of realism. It's the sense of, I want to do these things due diligence. I don't want to just, like a lot of the, and you can see all these artwork pictures all over the internet, on DeviantArt, on Instagram, on Twitter, where people have drawn like the Wendigo or drawn the Jersey Devil, and it's the more flourished, I call them the more movie style monsters, where they're so outlandish, but they still fit, like with the Jersey Devil. You know what it is just by looking at it, because you've seen it on TV, you've seen it, drawn so many times, and so so it's like, okay, you can see that. I try to give them more justice to show that they're a genuine animal, that they're not like, even with, like Bigfoot pictures, a lot of Bigfoot images, you'll either find the goofy, silly looking ones to the ones that are more terrifying, where they got blood dripping from their mouth and they got hugely exaggerated canines in their mouth, and they got giant wicked claws coming out of their hands. They're completely bloody and gory, like what you would see in a rated R monster movie flick. But you don't see a lot of images of Bigfoot just being an animal. It's an animal and so that's why I draw the way I do, is because I want to portray what I'm drawing in a light of, it's an animal. Because I've worked with animals for a good part of my life, and even being a hunter and appreciating the wildlife, even when I hunt it, I appreciate the fact that it's a majestic animal. I don't hunt it just to hunt it and kill it and hang it up on my wall. I do live off of the animal. I eat the animal. But I also thank the fact that it's like, well, without you, because of you, I'm able to sustain myself for another year and my family. And it's like, I give a lot of respect to the animals I hunt and to the animals that I interact with. And so that's why my art style is the way it is because I like the amazingly beautiful details that nature has, and I want to show that, and to show that realism that, okay, well, these are animals, because I believe they are just animals. So it's like, well, let me show you what it would really look like, what I think it would really look like, because again, a lot of the stories are embellished. A lot of the stories are embellished, and so you have to weed out the embellishments and get to the truth of the matter. So, with that being said, I know it's a very long-winded explanation.
No, that's good. No, you're good. Yeah, that's very fascinating, and I would say definitely comes out in your artwork. I definitely get the sense of everything you just explained, and I think it shows really well.
And I appreciate that.
All right. Let's see. We're coming in about 2 hours 44. So then I'll probably wrap it up soon. But before that, I would love to have a discussion before we go on what are some of your favorite cryptid pieces of media? You know, like your
Ah,
favorite TV shows, movies, or any documentaries.
okay. Um, so this isn't going to be in like any particular order, but I will start with the first thing that I was introduced to when it came down to cryptid stuff, and it was when I was a kid, and I remember this because it was a VHS that my grandma had, and I watched it all the time because it had dinosaurs in it, and it was Baby Secret of the Lost Legend,
Ah.
which for those who are listening to this or will be listening to this, um, it is a movie based on the cryptid, the Mokele Mbembe in Africa. So
Mhm.
it had three dinosaurs in it. They were three brontosauruses, and that was the first ever media that I ever saw when it came down to cryptid zoology, or had a creature that was based in cryptozoology. Um, and I still love that movie to this day. Even though they used suitmation for it, the suitmation was beautifully done anyway. The cinematography for it was done. The score that was done for that, oh my gosh, I still use the score when you see the dinosaurs for the first time, and that deep trumpet like sound. I still use that for my actual kaiju, um, Chelrung, the giant Galapagos six-legged
Mhm.
tortoise. His theme is that theme that's used for whenever the dinosaurs show up in Baby Secret of the Lost Legend. That is his
Mhm.
theme. Every time I draw him or look at him, that theme plays. Um, so then moving from there, uh, I didn't really watch a lot of the shows until I got older, because a lot of those shows didn't exist when I was
Mm.
younger. There wasn't any, like, Bigfoot documentaries. I mean, there were, but they were few and far in between. That was like the early '90s, late '80s.
Mhm.
So there wasn't like a whole lot of information like that, like what we have today. Um, but with that being said, my very first TV show was, like what you said, which was Lost Tapes. That's when I was really being introduced at that time. And I was about maybe 13, 14 years old when those were really starting to come out. And they scared me, to be 100% honest. Like, there was some of them you know, gave me nightmares.
Oh yeah.
Because for those who don't know what lost tapes are, I'll just make a quick summary. It's basically found footage. Like, people were, had their video cameras, and they happen upon these cryptids, which basically either, kill members in their group, or, they are attacked and killed. You know, it's a big drama, but it was done so that it really made you think, could these,
Mhm.
as they say in the show, you know are they out there, you know and so it kind of leaves you with that, well, could they really be out there? Because here's this found footage. And so a lot of it did scare me when I was growing up. But
Yeah.
then there was also Monster Quest, if you've ever heard of it.
Mm. Oh yeah.
Oh
Love
yeah, I
that.
still love Monster Quest. I still watch it to this day. uh, because Monster Quest would come on sometimes on Animal Planet, uh, or you would have to see it on Discovery Channel before the
Mhm.
the era of the
Oh
apps
yeah.
and stuff. You had to wait like Saturday, or after school when you got your homework done, and And if you had, Dish, which Dish was a brand new thing back then, so it was really cool to have satellite. and so you would get all those channels. And so, if you were lucky, after you got your homework done, you could watch on Animal Planet the Lost Tapes, or you could get onto the Discovery Channel and come across Monster Quest. But then after a while, when I actually got out of the military, I heard about Finding Bigfoot. And I have watched all the seasons, even the most current one, which after the with them coming back together, they only did one show, and then they never did any more after that, which I was disappointed. I mean, they're still a thing, though. The BFRO is still a thing, very much a thing. But watching that and it was just really cool to watch. And when they came to Indiana, I was like, they came to Indiana, and they went to Morgan Monroe State Park, and it's like, or the state forest, and I was like, oh. So whenever I go to Morgan Monroe, I just stand there, and it's like, I'm standing where the BFRO came to do research on Bigfoot, and it's like, oh, this is so cool. So, but then I don't know if you've ever heard of this show, but it's called Mountain Monsters.
Oh my god, I love that show.
Yes,
I on that one.
Mountain Monsters, I fell in love with, and my wife actually watches it with me because I do have kin in Kentucky and in West Virginia, and they're very much kind of like that. And so does she. She has kinfolk that are very much like that too. So I was like, oh my gosh, these are a bunch of hillbillies, and they're just like me. And it's like, oh, so I just started watching it. And I will admit, the guy that I go out with, he did get to meet Huckleberry. He got to meet a few of the other people from Mountain Monsters, and he got to meet I forgot her name from Finding Bigfoot. What's her name? Renee. Yeah, he got to meet Renee and talk with her at a convention. And he said it was just the coolest thing, being able to talk to Huckleberry and then be able to talk to Renee at a Bigfoot convention. But but from what I heard from him, because he did ask Huckleberry about Mountain Monsters, the show, and he's like, is any of that legitimate? And he's like, well, we do legitimately go out and look, do research, all the part about the Appalachian, I forget the name of their team again. They're the
Ames team.
Yeah, the Ames team. The
investigators Appalachian mysterious sightings.
Yes, that is a legitimate thing. That is a real thing. But the things that happen in the show, that's made up. That is more for the camera. And Huckleberry admitted that. And I was like, I mean, you could tell after a little bit that it was like, okay, this is kind of going a little bit too far. Or like with one episode, you could really tell that was a puppet. Like with the chupacabra in the back of the side by side, it's like, okay, that's a puppet. You can tell that's a puppet. But I mean the first season, though, it did make you really think that it's like, are they really out and actually finding this stuff? Because it's like, it was really cool the first season, but as the seasons went on, it's like you could really tell that there was some hokiness to it. But I mean, the fact that Trapper did pass away, he did die, and that made us very emotional. My wife and I did cry over that. We were very heartbroken about that when they did that episode.
Same here.
So, but I mean, so with that, I was like, but it's still a fun watch. It's still
I always found it funny. I always found it funny. Like the only monsters they ever really did catch were like real animals,
Yeah, like the like Hogzilla.
Yeah, they caught Hogzilla. They caught
Yeah,
the wolves they were looking for in one episode or one
yeah,
storyline.
in the later series where they went in, where Trapper after Trapper passed away, he talked about the wolves of West Virginia,
Mhm.
which that is a true fact that the wolves were wiped out in West Virginia, and so it's
Yeah.
like, well, hearing about wolves at that time, or during when it was shot, which was in 2019. They're like, okay, well, no, there can't be any wolves. Well, Trapper's like, no, I've seen them, and so them being able to find that, but it's like even that was kind of staged because wolves aren't that pretty. They're only that pretty
Yeah.
when they're they're raised in captivity. I mean, wolves are still magnificent animals. Don't get me wrong, but it's like a real wild wolf is not that well groomed.
Yeah.
So, uh, but even then, even the oh, what was that? The name of that three-toed bloodsucker dog? It wasn't the chupacabra. It was the the
Mhm.
the oh, whatever those dogs were.
Was it
They
the Hellhound?
no. It
No,
was
not
it
that.
was it was a white dog. It wasn't the
Ghost wolves.
it was something like that. It was because they sucked blood, or the white one did, but she had control over these other wild dogs, and they caught the wild
Mm.
dogs, but they didn't catch her, and they saw the foot track, or the track of hers being around, and a lot of those tracks you could look at those and it's like those were pressed into the dirt, like those were not like a legitimate track. That was just someone taking a stamp and putting it into the ground. It's like, okay, because at the beginning, like I said, the first season going into the second season, you could see the tracks that they were following, that they were saying that they were following. They looked pretty legit. But like I
Mm.
said, as the seasons went on, you could really tell that there were some of
Yeah.
them where it's like, okay, that's a legitimate just stamp.
And then you had like the storylines of like there's this rogue team that's stalking the Ames crew, and then there's like this
Yeah,
witchcraft, which the witchcraft stuff like genuinely scared me. Like even if I
yeah.
knew it was like staged, like that was like a scary part of the show.
Well, yeah, the one episode that really got my wife into really watching mountain monsters with me was when I got to the skinwalkers, the season
Mm.
with the skinwalkers, and the very first one, which was the uh, the the wolf lady,
Mm.
um, where she basically killed her family so that she could become a skinwalker. And my wife was really drawn into those two episodes because it was split into two episodes. And that's what really drew her into it, because she was just watching that and she was like, "Are you serious?" And the story of, this lady who, it's like, well, how do you become a skinwalker? Well, you have to kill someone that is in your family. You have to kill them to basically prove that, that you will dedicate yourself to this magic. I mean, in the real story of skinwalkers, that is true, but it's different. Skinwalkers are, in the Native American tales, or folklore, they're either tricksters, pranksters, or they're very malevolent witches, and that's what, and they're known as witches, even though a lot of them are men. In Native American folklore, witches are anyone who practices magic.
Mm.
Um, so a witch isn't like a female who has a pointed hat and a cauldron. It's
Yeah.
basically someone who deals with magic. Um, but in the show, they cloaked them in black robes, which was really cool for some of the episodes. It was really cool to see when the skinwalkers would show up. It's like, wow. But then there's others where it's like, wait a minute, I saw that costume and it was at Party City.
Yeah. The production value was here and there.
It was very much here and there. Sometimes it was really cool. Other times it's like, okay, I can really tell that's not real. So, but it was, again, it was entertainment. As Huckleberry said, it was just for entertainment. But they do legitimately go out and still do the sightings. But that was years ago. I'm hearing now that some of them are really they're getting older, so they're
Yeah,
not able to do it much anymore. So
I
they
know they
don't do
mostly
it
like
anymore.
go to conventions and stuff.
Yeah, they
Like
still do,
industry
but
conventions.
they just can't do it anymore. It's kind
Mm-hmm.
of like with Trapper, where it's like he's gotten to that point where he can no longer do it,
Yeah.
and so I mean they were supposed to have like one final season, like one more season, and then they were going to call it, but that was like 2 or 3 years ago that I last heard
Yeah.
about that, and nothing else has come up about it. So who knows? Who really
I
knows? I
know.
think it just officially ended with the wolves, with the smoke wolves thing, because it
Mm-hmm.
went from the wolves into smoke wolves, then into
Yeah.
Bigfoot, and it just kept jumping from one thing to another, and
Uh, I
and it
absolutely,
huh oh
I absolutely loved the episodes when you had cryptids that were crossing over. So like they were looking for this one Bigfoot, and then the Grafton monster shows up, or the Yahoo shows up,
yeah.
and it's crazy how they had these crossover episodes. I love those ones. Those are cool.
Yep. And then let's see, I did get to see the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek.
Hmm. I still
um
need to watch that one.
yeah, I mean, it's more like a docudrama. I mean, it's set
Yeah.
up as a documentary, but it's also a movie. But again, it was done in like the late 70s, early 80s. So, I mean, don't expect too much from it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, um, let's see, what other. Uh, I mean, if you really think about it, The Little Mermaid is is also a cryptid kind of a film, because mermaids are a cryptid, and those stories have been around for generations. So, but that's just me, poking fun.
Did
Um,
you did you ever watch that mockumentary Mermaids the Body Found?
yes, the ones that was done by Animal Planet. Yes.
Yeah.
Um, that was an interesting one to watch, because they did two of them. They did
Mm-hmm.
mermaids, uh, body found, but then they did a second one like a year later, where it kind of did like a more in-depth look
Yeah.
on it. And then they did like the behind the scenes stuff for it too. So it was like a third thing, which it's kind of rare now to try to find, trying to find that third one, which basically goes into the behind the scenes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I know that caused a lot of controversy too.
it
Um,
did.
hmm
And it's still a thing where, there,
Yeah.
you can find things on like Twitter and TikTok where they still use video from that documentary
Yeah.
and try to pass it off as, well, here it is, here's a legitimate thing, and it's like, no, I know where that came from. This
Yeah.
isn't a this isn't it's supposed to look like found footage because it was used for the
Yeah.
documentary of mermaids.
I
Like,
know. I know
no.
one they're using now that got really viral was the megalodon ones.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, those got really popular in recent years.
Yes. And then Dragons, a Fantasy Made Real.
Oh, I love that one. I love
And
that
that
one.
one was actually the spark for me to do my speculative evolution,
Mm.
because it was thanks to that I came up with the Godzillasaurs. Because if you look close, there's the oceanic Godzillasaurs, the
Yeah.
forest Godzillasaurs, the plains Godzillasaurs, and the swamplands Godzillasaurs. Well, in Dragons
hmm
of Fantasy Made Real, there's the prehistoric dragon, forest dragon, aquatic dragon, and the mountain dragon.
Yeah.
So it was because of Dragons of Fantasy Made Real, um, that I actually, started that. And that was just me doing hand drawing, traditional drawing at that time. But then I went on ahead and just, redid my traditional art and made it digital. And then I was like, well, I'm going to go on ahead and make a video about it. It's not going to be that popular. I mean, my YouTube channel only had about like 500 subscribers, and it wasn't even building. And I was doing more like, like figure reviews, and that was hardly getting me anywhere. And it's like, well, this isn't going to go anywhere. And it's still the most watched video to this day, and it's almost been a full year. And I exploded from 500 subscribers to 5,000, nearly 700 in a span of almost a year, just because of that video alone. And that's what started it all. And it was all thanks to Dragons, a Fantasy Made Real.
Did you ever watch the one mockumentary called Cannibal in the Jungle?
Yes, where it talks about not the Orang Pendek, but the other one.
Ibagogo.
That
the
one.
Hobbits.
Yes, that one creeped me out. I am not gonna lie.
Yeah, me too. That one was really scary, and because I honestly thought that one was real for a good while.
Because how they did the cinematography for the found footage versus like the theatrical part of it. It was like, and I had to do a whole bunch of research on that one because the found footage looked so real. How they did it, it's like this has to be real.
I think the thing that helped too was they casted different people for the found footage stuff and then the reenactment. So it wasn't like it was the same people doing the parts. They had different actors. Which,
that helps sell it.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I mean, for the longest time, I was like, no way. But there is a grain of truth to it anyway. And it is the stories, the actual sightings and stories from the natives talking about this stuff. And so the fact that there is a grain of truth to that, it's like that still sends shivers down my spine about that kind of stuff. It's like, ugh.
Yeah. Let's see. Have you watched the movie? It's done by the same person the director who did the Blair Witch. Exists.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of it. I think I might have seen. Is it the show Exists, or is it a movie?
It's a movie. It's a movie.
Okay. I've heard of it. I've not seen it, but I've heard of it. There's several other movies.
Yeah, it's like a feature length Lost Tapes episode, like Blair Witch. It's really well. It's about Bigfoot, so.
Yep. There was one, I think that it was something like that too, where I think at the end of it, the guy points a gun at Bigfoot after all of his friends who were out camping were camping at this cabin or something like that, that he's the only one who managed to survive this attack from Bigfoot, but it came after him, but he managed to keep the gun pointed right at it and it just stopped, and he basically told it, I'm walking away, and he still backed up with the camera, but you can see the barrel of the gun pointing directly at the Bigfoot, and it's just standing there like heavily breathing and kind of grunting and growling before he finally gets away, and he's the only one who survived. I forget what movie that was from. I don't know if that was Exists or...
I think that is Exists.
Oh, okay. Well, then I got to see snippets of that then. Let's see. There was also Harry and the Hendersons.
Ah, that's a good one.
I mean, it's still a heartwarming film about Bigfoot. But I mean, now we're starting to get into the more, modern films and stuff. Again, back then in the early 90s and into the late 80s, they didn't do a whole lot of stuff like that. I mean, when it comes down to like cryptids, if you want to call them cryptids, they did a lot of things like dragons and dinosaurs and things like that. But they really didn't dive too much into like the actual cryptid stories.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Other than that, I mean, I don't think I've seen anything else. Nothing else is really coming to mind. I mean, I have a few, like of those B movies, that had, like again, I own Baby Secret of the Lost Legend on DVD. I even have a little figure that was made by I forgot his name, but
Was
he
it
he
Creature or
yeah,
something?
yeah, Creature Preacher, where he made the baby, and he said
Yeah.
that he was going to make the parents, but he never did, and I was so disappointed because it's like, okay, well, if you make the parents, I'm definitely gonna buy the parents from you. There was also, that's right, the Crater Lake Monster, the movie, the
Yeah,
Crater
that's a
Lake
good one.
Monster, was a stop motion film of
Yeah, I've
basically
seen that one.
yeah. So there was that one. I own that on DVD. There's also Q, which I mean, kind
Oh,
of
that's a good one.
Q is another one that's, I guess you could kind of call that a cryptid film because it kind of tries to, make it sound, make it to where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, it is a real animal. That's what the Aztecs were worshiping. It wasn't a myth. So it's like, okay, you can kind of take that as a cryptid film.
Yeah.
I mean, the beast from 20,000 Fathoms, you could kind of say that's a cryptid, kind of, because it's still a dinosaur or a giant prehistoric reptile. Back
Mm.
then, it was called a dinosaur. Today,
Yeah.
people would look at that and go, no, that's a prehistoric reptile. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm going off of what was done in the 50s, okay? Hush. It's
Yeah.
a dinosaur. There's also the Valley of Guanji, which is also a
Mm.
take on cryptid zoology, kind of, where it talks about
Yeah.
dinosaurs living, today. And there have been stories of cowboys coming across, you know, these prehistoric creatures that seem to be dinosaurs, like thunderbirds, things like that. And so the Valley
Yeah.
of Guanji kind of takes that concept a little bit further. So you could say that is kind of a cryptid film. I mean, even King Kong could really be considered one as well, because again, silverback gorillas weren't really known. They were thought to be, not real animals because science said that no, these aren't real animals. And natives were talking about, creatures that were hairy and they looked like men and they lived in the mountains. Well, science said at that time, which was about the 1910s, 1920s, probably the 1890s, I think, that they were saying no, there's no way. And then like 50 to almost 100 years later, it's the silverback gorilla. And so that's where the story of King Kong comes into play, where, the fact that, well, okay, these things that we thought couldn't exist, they do exist. Well, what else could there be?
Yeah.
And there's even Jules Verne's the Lost World, not Jurassic Park, but the original Lost World.
Mm-hmm.
That could be considered as a cryptid film because it takes the stories of like the Mokele Mamembe and other living dinosaurs, and they live on this plateau that which the thought was there with Jules Verne about, well, when the Earth was shifting and everything during the time of the dinosaurs, that part of the land moved up, so that meant that it was basically like a time capsule, and that life
Mm-hmm.
continued on up there, whereas the rest of life down below, changed over the millennia. And the dinosaurs that were on the main part of the land died off, but the dinosaurs that were locked up, on top of that plateau, they just they kept living because they were
Yeah.
untouched. So it's like, yeah, I could see that. um let's see. I mean, there's a lot of films that if you think about it, back in the 50s and whatnot, could be taken as, cryptid like films or loosely based around. Because
Yeah.
if you really think about it, it's like, well, yeah, that you know, they had to get that inspiration from somewhere. And so I know that they've had to have heard stories and tales. And so it's like, well, why not? That would make for a really good film. But we'll embellish it to where we want it and how we want it so that we can tell a story.
Yeah, like if you take something like tarantula, there
Yeah,
are stories of giant spiders in the Amazon in the Congo. So
exactly.
you can point at, you know, any kaiju media and,
Exactly.
draw a
Like
line back to a cryptid.
it came from beneath the sea. It's a giant
Hmm.
octopus. Well, there
Yeah,
is a cryptid, the kraken.
yeah,
It's a giant octopus. It's a giant squid. So yeah, if you look at a lot of kaiju films, they basically kind of are a hallmark to cryptozoology. And so that's why I did
hmm,
what I did with the speculative evolution, where I take a lot of the cryptid stories to explain how, the dinosaurs or the prehistoric reptiles that lived from back then and how they're still alive today, and it explains how they became the kaiju that we know in the film.
yeah,
So that's what I have done, was take cryptozoology a step further, like with Rodan. I took the Ropin and um there was one other. There's the Ropin and the Kongamatu. The Ropin from New
hmm,
Guinea and the Kongamatu from the Congo and Africa, which are two flying pterosaurs, and um the Ropin is said to be bioluminescent. And so I made Rodan bioluminescent
mm,
so that I could tie in, okay, well, how is it that a pteranodon like or a pterosaur like dinosaur managed to survive to this day? And okay, so where would the proof be? Well, it's the cryptozoology. So it's kind of like how the MonsterVerse kind of went about doing their film or doing their films, where they have the elements of cryptozoology, but they also have the elements from, like, ancient texts and things like that, and the names that were given to certain creatures and then certain gods and things like that. So they went, they have that route. I went more the route of the cryptids. Godzilla was a huge stretch for me, but I had to kind of stick the uh, with their form of cryptozoology when it came down to the story that's told about when they would feed young or sacrifice young maidens by putting them on a boat and putting them out to sea to appease Gojira so that they could have good fishing. And it's like, well, what species would be able to survive to that day? Well, I created the oceanic Godzillasaurus. And it's like, well, what would they be feeding? Well, it's an oceanic Godzillasaurus that was around there, that lived around that island. And so I had to go with that and try to make its own crypto, mythology kind of thing. With Anguirus,
hmm,
I actually took the legend of a dragon from Native Americans. The Native Americans had a dragon-like creature that they knew about, and so that's where I went with that. Gorosaurus, I had to really go the route of, King Kong, the route of like King Kong escapes. I had to go that route, um, to, but still using that kind of mythology and making it seem like it's a true cryptid kind of thing. You know, kind of like how the 1933 film kind of also went out or did, was that it was stories. It was stories about an island that had prehistoric life on it, and it
yeah,
was just a story. But then it was oh, well, this is real. So, with that being said, it's like, as you said, a lot of kaiju films do kind of have their basis in cryptozoology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting, like how far can you take stories, because you have something that is based, in part in reality. You have this real life phenomenon, and then you can just go with it when it comes to any piece of fiction.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I don't want to try to cut this short. We've been on here for nearly 3.5 hours. It's almost 10 o'clock here, and I got to get my dogs out
Ooh.
to the bathroom. So,
Yeah, no problem, boss. Thank you for coming on.
I
Unless you
appreciate it. I
want,
had fun.
yeah, me too, man. It was awesome. Thank you for coming on to the debut of Cryptic Happenings. Gonna be doing lots more of these in the near future. But before you go, there's anything else you want to like show out or mention? Give a shout out. You have the floor, and then we'll close it up.
Fair enough. Um, well, I want to say that if you ever want me back on here, I am more than happy to do so because I still have a whole lot of more stories. I
Mm,
only shared just the tip of the iceberg, um, but I have a whole lot more, and I have a lot more insight on a lot of other cryptids because I have studied them. Um,
oh,
um, so if you ever want to bring me back on the show, I am more than happy to do so. Uh, Also, I know that you also have other shows that you do. Um, I because I got the chance to kind of look around your YouTube channel, um, and so if you ever want me on any of those, I am more than happy to hop on there as well as a guest or whatever. So
awesome. Thank you.
yeah, no problem. This was very fun. Um, I really don't have much else going on. I'm still, printing out the King Tyrannus figure, the 5.5 inch figure. I actually had to put that. I had to put a stop to that for now because since I don't start my job yet until the beginning part of July, I don't have any money to purchase more resin to print the figure. So I've only got 3 in existence right now, technically 4, but on Father's Day, I gave my father the first prototype. So the first painted prototype.
Mm,
So I only have 3 figures right now. Um, Also, I'm I'm doing commissions right now to kind of try to help
mm-hmm,
supplement uh, at the current moment. I'm also trying to put together the Chitanosaurus uh, speculative evolution video. Since I have all 3 prehistoric reptiles finished, I am now putting together its script so that I can get it ready to go. And then Titanosaurus will be coming up after that, and that will actually be the end of this first series.
mm,
That will be the end of this first series of speculative evolution kaiju and the analysis of the actual kaiju that came from the speculative. And then I will put an end to that for a little bit so that I can focus more on putting King Tyrannus out there more, making a actual video on him so that it explains him as a whole. Also working on the comic book and having it finished and ready to go so that it can go into press and get it printed out so that I can have it to go along with the 5.5 inch figure that will be sold together. So, and that's what's going to happen in between. Once I get all that done and it's on its way, then I'll be hopping back into the speculative evolution again and doing 5 more kaiju from Toho.
awesome.
And that's it for me.
Awesome. So if you got to bounce, thank you again. Feel free to. Um, and again, everyone who hopped on, Go check out his stuff. Very good. Heavily recommend.
Well, again, thank you for having me here. And thank you to everyone who has been watching this and got to see it. Uh, hopefully, you guys enjoyed my stories. And hopefully, that gives you guys some food for thought for those who were kind of skeptical about the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Awesome.
well, I'm
Thank you
bouncing
very
out of
much,
here.
man. Have a good one.
All right, you too, man. And thanks again.
No problem. Alrighty, guys. So, thank you very much for joining me for the first episode of the Cryptic Happenings podcast. As you know, this is a podcast dedicated to all things cryptozoology, whether it be stories, thoughts, theories, or cryptid media, anything from Bigfoots to UFOs to chupacabras, anything and everything mysterious and cryptic. Again, can't thank you guys enough for joining me. Everyone who stepped in, anyone who had any inputs, questions, thank you. I know Alice was in there. A lot. Thank you for your inputs. Apologies if I didn't get everything you wanted to say in here, but thank you for stopping by. We'll be doing definitely a lot more of these. Another big thank you to Lizard King Productions for hopping on and sharing his stories. Definitely go check out his stuff. But stay tuned for more podcasts. We're doing the drawcasts. We have the cryptid happenings that are going to be coming by very soon. So stay tuned. Over and out, Kaiju Seekers. Until next time.